from supporting local farms to our local.
Mom?
Really happened tonight. Her son was shot to death inside his girlfriend's South Carolina.
Hey all, this is Black Leather Mom on the Forgotten World. I'm just streaming to have a little fun. I gotta figure out where I'm gonna. Actually, I'm gonna leave this. Right here. And I gotta go get some stuff. I'm going to break these wooden boxes once I get this done. And then I gotta go out and get meat. I gotta go get some element. By the way, this is Valgaro that I'm on. I'm gonna break this one too, because the meat's all swollen. I'm getting tired of that. This is the only one that's good. But it's shitting, and I don't have those animals here right now. I do need to make one more. Element do I got in here? I don't know why this egg's in here. That needs to get out of there. Okay, looks like I got. So I'm gonna take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll leave the rest in there for now. I don't know how much dust I got over on this area. I'm probably gonna have to bring some dust over sometime. Okay, so let me put some element on this one here over here. takes care of this one here. So this one here, this out, and this out. And I'm just going to destroy this. I don't. I'm going to leave that one there. That one can stay with the berries. Berries, I don't mind that one for berries. What else I got here? Is that the one with berries? No, I'm gonna pick up this one. Pick up the stone. The meat I don't need. I'm just gonna let the meat go. So I think I have a feeder over here. Somebody named Human. I'll just leave them. Okay, so this one takes care of this area. There's one inside, but it's for stuff inside. Probably put that there. Let's go ahead and take this one out of here. Hello, Tom. Okay, so I need to pick up this one that's not getting. There, now it's getting. Getting what it needs to get, so that works. All right. Now let me go out and get some. I'm gonna go ahead and. Well, turn the one off on the inside because that's just shitting. couldn't get Dallas to go out earlier, so I didn't force her. Maybe, huh? Maybe Dallas will go out now. I don't know. Wanna go out, Dallas? No? You don't pee in the house. Alright, she just doesn't seem to want to go out a lot of times.
Yes, $10,000 per student with student loan debt. That's what they're paying for that right now. 74 days before the midterm elections. Brianna, today's a big day. The administration says that, well, or not the administration, the former administration, the former president, Donald Trump, he says that, look, this is all about records, and no other president in U.S. history has ever been treated like this. Do you think we get much from this affidavit today?
I don't think we get much, and there's a few points that I think is important. Ron Klain, who just said he hopes the media doesn't talk about it, but remember, it is the FBI, which has been politicized by the Biden administration, that is leaking this highly important, secrets to the Washington Post, the New York Times, and yet they don't want to release it to the public, and it's incumbent upon them to justify their reasoning. And I think with the affidavit, we're not really going to get much, but I think it's incumbent upon them as well to explain why they put out such a general warrant when the Fourth Amendment makes sure that there is objective criteria that the government has to meet in order to justify their actions. And if you read that warrant over, I mean, they basically said, search wherever you want. They would have been easier to just say, don't search this one place, right? Because that's what we saw in that warrant. So I think that hopefully, if that affidavit does come out today, it sheds some light on why they just issued this general warrant, because I think that's a Fourth Amendment violation.
Okay, if you are at home and you are thinking about the 2016 election and the Russia hoax, nobody knows about that more than you, Rick. There was some sound yesterday. Joe Rogan has got a podcast. He had Mark Zuckerberg, the founder and head of CEO on, the founder and CEO of Facebook on, and Mark Zuckerberg with some sound that absolutely blew me away. Take a listen to this.
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team. It was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump that's similar to that. So just be vigilant.
Betsy, I want to get your reaction. I can see you shaking your head. That'll be the biggest news story in America over the weekend. Is that gets
Oh yes,
more
he's
traction?
referring to the Hunter Biden laptop,
Exactly.
which the FBI, obviously for partisan reasons, tried to smear as Russian disinformation. The information on that laptop was validated at the time by the New York Post. That's why we went with that story. And yet the FBI tried to deceive the American people into thinking, move along, folks, there's nothing here.
Rick, I'm quoting here, but Rogan said, well, do you feel, he basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, do you feel bad? Because, Facebook misled the American people, and that affected a very close presidential election. You think about those 3 states that are really in question. We're talking about fewer than 40,000 votes here. And Facebook says that because the FBI tipped them off, they push those stories way down on news feeds. I've told this story plenty of times on the air. My own parents they weren't familiar with the Hunter Biden laptop story until after the 2020 election. Mark Zuckerberg said, yeah, he said it sucks. Mark, you just swung a presidential election. I think you could really make that argument. But the FBI, that is a completely political move, if you ask me. What do you think, Rick?
Yeah, no question it is, and this is the issue. We find out when it's 2022, Zuckerberg comes out and makes his claim. Well, that's great. It's kind of what we knew, but what the problem is that it's already impacted the election. We can't go back in time and put this information out. So were there elements within the FBI, other government agencies, media organizations that impacted the election? Absolutely. Now we're getting the truth, but unfortunately we are stuck with this debacle of holding these people accountable, and that is something that we have to do a better job of moving forward.
Brianna, I was in local news. I came to Newsmax in November 2020. I was in local news down in Florida before that. My news director told us we couldn't talk about the Hunter Biden story, that it was fake news, that it was Russian disinformation. That's the lengths that the left went to suppress that story. And Mark Zuckerberg just admitted to it. We're 74 days away from very important midterm elections. Is the FBI doing it again with this raid on Mar-a-Lago, playing politics?
That's a real question. And I think when it comes to the FBI, I was reading earlier this week, the reason that they were so hesitant to touch the Biden laptop story is because they didn't want to impact the election the way that things happened in 2016 ACA when they had basically taken over doing all those DNC and all their actions there, right? So this is a dereliction of duty because the FBI had voters voting under false pretenses, and those false pretenses were, this is Russian disinformation, this is invalid, and like you said of your former boss, they told you not to cover it. Remember, it was NPR that literally said, you don't want to waste our readers' time. It's not up to you as a reader's piece to read from your platform, it's up to you to just put the news out there and let them make those own determinations for themselves. They weren't willing to do it. Several other outlets weren't as well. And 2 years later, now these outlets are giving some credit to the Hunter Biden laptop story and the validity of it. And it's a real shame because voters did not have all the information when they headed to the polls.
Great point, Brianna. That's why we've got the First Amendment, not to protect language you agree with, to protect language that you do not agree with. So Mark Zuckerberg sounds that's moving away. A lot more to unpack as we go through the morning here as we wake up on this Friday. Joe Biden, believe it or not, back on the campaign trail yesterday. Boy, he went all the way from D.C. to Maryland. Wow. We'll get into that top of the hour. Looking forward to that. Rick James, Brianna Lyman. That's a good point. Thank you. Alex, over to you.
In the war in Afghanistan since February of 2020. Now, it was fantastic that the wounded warriors going to support both sides, yard or outside their business, in order to honor these nations. And the Iraq War Monument was doing the same, an awesome reminder that the voting number should always be honored for making the ultimate sacrifice. Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs telling us not to forget them, adding thousands of American and Afghan allies were abandoned, billions of dollars as the sun set at the George Ingles Veterans Memorial in North Bay, California last night. Community members gathered on the eve of the attack to honor the over the name.
Did you know there's a strange new method for rebuilding gums and teeth? And it's working so incredibly well that people are saying goodbye to their dentist forever. So, if you suffer from bleeding or receding gums, throbbing toothaches or decay, gingivitis, bad breath, or any type of periodontal issue, then you have to see this. Breakthrough research has finally uncovered the real root cause of the gum and tooth diseases of the modern era. It has nothing to do with your diet, age, or even your genetics, but instead with this shocking thing that's hidden deep inside the mouth right now. A highly acclaimed ENT surgeon has discovered a remarkable melting mineral that targets this, restoring the gums and teeth in just weeks. How does this work? By letting this mineral softly melt in your mouth after brushing, your mouth is flooded with pure oxygen and microscopic healing ingredients that reach in between the teeth and deep inside the gum pockets. Something that has not been possible until now. This method has been clinically proven to work on absolutely anyone who struggles with any type of periodontal issue. In fact, over 150,000 people are already using this, and testimonials are flooding in, saying how easy, pain-free and effective it is.
One of many, many touching stories. It leaves a lot of people just furious at President Biden, including GOP chairwoman Ronna McCain, tweeting that Biden still hasn't said a word about the tragedy 1 year ago, calling it shameful. And then Texas Senator Ted Cruz says Biden gave Afghanistan to the Taliban. Now he intends to give a nuclear arsenal to Iran. And this viewer says this is Biden's legacy. 13 coffins from Afghanistan on this day 1 year ago today.
Yeah, it's just amazing, Alex. Appreciate that. Let's keep the conversation going now as we look back 1 year later. Joining us now for more is the Vice Chair of the Center for American Security in Washington, Fred Flights. Good morning. Good to see you.
You're happy to be here.
So, Fred, as Alex just set up for us, today marks a year since the 13 U.S. soldiers were killed outside the airport in Kabul. A year ago, there was no war in Ukraine. China wasn't on the brink of invading Taiwan. How much of our failed withdrawal then is affecting what's happening around the world right now?
Well, I have to say the setup for speak is exactly right. We have to recognize the service of these brave men and women who gave their lives for our country, for our freedom. The disaster in Afghanistan changed the world. It changed the perception of the United States. It changed global security. It encouraged Putin to invade Ukraine. It probably encouraged the North Koreans to fire an unprecedented number of missiles and probably to restart their nuclear program. It encouraged China to step up their threats to Taiwan. We are much less safe today than we were a year ago, and I am very worried what's going to happen before this president leaves office, hopefully in January 2025.
Do you think this happens if we didn't totally blow this withdrawal throughout the month of August 2021? And do you think Joe Biden is back on the campaign trail today? He was in Maryland yesterday. Do you think he mentions it?
I don't think he's going to mention it. I think this is a time where this should be a solemn time for President Biden. He should be talking about this. He should be going to war memorials. This is on Joe Biden. We know that Biden rejected the advice from his generals and other advisors not to do it this way. Biden insisted this disaster is his fault.
Yeah, we've got the mother of one of the 13 that died 1 year ago today joining us this morning here on Wake Up America. I'm very happy to have her on, but this is not a new so more on that coming up in just a little bit, Fred. I'd like to talk about the Iran nuclear deal for a moment. The administration still trying to revive that 2015 deal with Iran. Former President Donald Trump pulled us out of that deal in 2018 because he said it was a bad deal for the United States. The U.S. has sent a revised deal to the Iranians and are now waiting on a response. You wrote an op-ed all about this for Newsmax.com. Take us through what's in this latest deal.
This deal is much weaker than the other deal, but let me tell you that the 2015 deal gave Iran $150 billion in sanctions relief, $1.7 billion cash. This agreement will give Iran $1 trillion in sanctions relief, $1.75 billion in the first year, and $7 billion in cash. But Rob, that's not the worst part of this. We asked the Iranians to agree to a language to stop trying to kill Americans. And this isn't just because they tried to kill Bolton or Basia Linajad. The Iranians just last month tried to kill or assassinate her for the second time at her home in Brooklyn. the second time.
Right.
And in my view, there's certain things that should be non-negotiable with our enemies. And if Iran won't agree to this, we should not be giving them these vast amounts of cash, which they're going to use on terrorism and to kill American soldiers.
Fred, your point's taken. I'm not a policy expert, but I think agreeing to stop killing Americans should be part of any deal. I would also, by the way, not allow them to continue to enrich uranium, which is how you build a nuclear weapon. And this deal would include their ability to continue to do that, which makes absolutely no sense. Fred, we've got to leave it there. Hope you have a great weekend. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
You too. Good to be here.
All right. We've got a lot more coming up this morning on Wake Up America. A year ago, again, 13 U.S. service members lost their lives in Kabul, Afghanistan, as a result of Joe Biden's failed withdrawal from Afghanistan. Newsmax Jerusalem correspondent Daniel Cohen will be joining us next for more on the impact of this terrible day. Stay with us.
The economy has been turned back on because of the work that this president has done. The economy is stronger than it's been in some time.
The White House claims the economy, as you just heard, is in great shape, but they still can't say who's going to be paying for the president's student loan forgiveness plan. Good morning. Welcome back into Wake Up America. It's a Friday morning. Happy Friday to you. August the 26th. I'm Rob Finnerty, and here are some of the other stories that we're following for you right now. President Biden kicked off his midterm campaign with a rally in Maryland, where the president said once again that MAGA Republicans, whatever that is, are a threat to democracy, while praising his inflation reduction spending bill. Plus, it's been 18 days since the raid on Mar-a-Lago, and Florida Judge Bruce Reinhart has ordered the release of the redacted affidavit by noon Eastern time today. In the meantime, the White House continues to claim the president had no advance knowledge of that raid. Plus this.
We were able to get a 27-year-old transgender woman, Miami Wolf-Terrier, and a member of the furry fandom.
When and how did you discover this inner wolfness?
Probably around age 10 or 11. I was watching an anime about wolves and see the wolf running across the screen, and then somehow instinctively like, oh, that's me.
Have you spent any time around biological wolves?
Yes.
That sounds dangerous also. What context are you?
So I was a volunteer at a reserve, and I've also visited many wolf preserves.
Are you able to communicate with the wolf?
Am I going to have a conversation with a wolf in the way that I'm communicating you and I? Obviously not. Am I going to read their body language, responding to their behaviors and their nonverbal cues? Yes.
Would you be able to illustrate an example of this wolf communication?
No. Not comfortable with that.
Okay. Great. For wireless purposes.
U.S. Cellular, they aren't raising prices on any plans, which is refreshing.
Supply chain got us too. Every plan for everyone is price protected, only at U.S. Cellular.
First breakthrough, the first peace deal in over 40 years there. And then we got the second peace deal and the third peace deal. And we finally ended up getting 6 peace deals in the last 6 months. And again, this was just because President Trump was an outsider. He thought like a businessman. We were results driven, and we did things differently.
Coming up, former Trump senior advisor Jared Kushner is going to be with me in studio with an inside look at what it was like working for his father-in-law at the White House for 4 years. He also has some surprises about the 2016 and 2020 elections, so keep it here for that. Talked to him for a long time, too. Welcome back. In just a few hours, we should have our very first look at that redacted affidavit. We thought it could happen yesterday. The judge punted it. It will happen at noon today. This all going back to that raid on Mar-a-Lago 18 days ago. Joining us now once again to break down what we can expect today is civil rights attorney, former prosecutor, and Newsmax contributor Amir Benno. Amir, good to see you. Here we go again, my friend. What are you expecting to see today when we do finally get this affidavit?
I think it's going to be a big disappointment, Rob. I think it's going to be highly redacted, and the information that most Americans want to see, which is what's the evidence of probable cause? Did the government reveal, or did they omit certain information about President Trump's prior cooperation? Did they omit evidence about the fact that the FBI may have had dual motives? They may have, they're conducting other investigations into President Trump aside from these records. those things are not going to be visible to the ordinary American, unfortunately.
Amir, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg did some really interesting sound. This will be everywhere today in Russia. In fact, he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he said that the FBI told him just prior to the 2020 election that there was going to be some story from Russia, Russian disinformation about the Hunter Biden laptop. Take a listen to what Mark Zuckerberg says happened.
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, and some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, we should get high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump that's similar to that. So just be vigilant.
Wow. So he's admitting to it. They suppressed the story. They suppressed the story deliberately to try to swing the election in Joe Biden's favor. He's saying they didn't realize what they were doing. They were trusting the FBI. Here we're 74 days away from really important midterm elections. 18 days ago, the FBI raids the former president's house. Are they doing it again? Is the FBI all politics?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it has been, as Chuck Grassley said, infected, politically infected, and completely lost the trust of the American people for, their subterfuge when it comes to the Biden laptop. Most recently, you have two individuals who were compelled to plead guilty to trafficking, they call it trafficking, Ashley Biden's diary, facing 5 years in prison for each of them. But meanwhile, somebody like Hunter Biden, who actually did traffic human beings for sex across state lines, gets a free ride on Air Force One. It's a complete double standard. They have a long way to go to regain the American people's trust.
Yeah, and the laptop, there's some parts that are the photos of Hunter Biden doing crack with strippers and hookers and all that kind of stuff. Fine, but the real question is kickbacks to Joe Biden, the big guy. That's what's in question here when it comes to the Hunter Biden laptop. Amir.
Well, hey, Rob, I'll just say on that, sure. People shouldn't forget the fact that President Trump was impeached because he wanted the Ukrainian president to look into some of those criminal doings of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, which was his prerogative as a president. But when Joe Biden decides, hey, I'm going to, use the FBI to raid the home of the former president to get dirt on somebody who's going to be my opponent, most likely, in an upcoming election.
No, totally.
Nobody on the left does anything.
Amir, can I just about 10 seconds? Harvey Weinstein, you former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney, Harvey Weinstein's got an appeal. If he wins this, is he out of jail?
No, not necessarily. This just means the Court of Appeals is going to hear his case. They don't hear every case. That's the highest court in New York. So they're going to hear it. There's some legal issues there about whether or not they sat a juror who might have had some predisposed against him. Some other legal issues. So, no, it doesn't mean that. By the way, he's facing prosecution in California for other sexual crimes. So I don't think he's going to see freedom anytime soon.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. That caught my attention. When I heard that, I was like, oh boy, is he going to get out of jail? Okay, Amir Beto, have a great weekend. We'll do it again next week. Thank you.
You too, Rob. Thanks.
All right. But first, I do want to get back to that student loan debt bailout fiasco. Betsy McCoy wrote in the New York Post that this is Biden's Hail Mary pass to try and buy votes. For more on that, let's welcome back reporter for the Daily Caller, Brianna Lyman, former Trump New York Post columnist, and Newsmax with Betsy McCoy. Betsy, what do you make of this $10,000? Just wiped off the books for anybody making less than $125,000. Your article says that's $10,000 to vote for a group of people that doesn't really like Joe Biden right now.
Well, that's right. And if you are in the category of one of those borrowers who thinks they just hit the jackpot, don't spend the money yet. Because the chances are very great that, in fact, the Supreme Court will smack down this plan. They've already smacked down 3 other attempts by Joe Biden to make, quote, consequential decisions for the nation without the participation of Congress. And this one, by its very magnitude, is extremely consequential because it will cost $300 billion at the outset, more altogether. The $300 billion, that is twice the size of the entire budget of the U.S. Army. Do you really think the president has the authority to spend that money without Congress appropriating it? No.
It should be.
And I think it's a great point. There's something called the non-delegation doctrine, which says that Congress is not allowed to just simply delegate its authority to the executive branch. And the reason being is because The founders were very intent that Congress holds the purse because they are direct representatives of the people, whereas Biden or the president is just one person. So I don't think Biden has any foot to stand on with this one. I think that that's set and likely will be shut down if it makes it to the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, we're seeing him overabuse his executive power and seeing just how far he can get. And the fact that they're using the HEROES Act from 2003, they're going to use an act after a terrorist attack to try and push through this. It's like they say, a politician never lets a crisis go to waste.
Yeah, the HEROES Act, Brianna, by the way, that was meant for times of war. In other words, we were at war with Iraq and Afghanistan 2003, post 9/11. That was implemented. No, exactly. That was implemented in case somebody went to fight for their country and had student loan debt. The government was saying, listen, we'll wipe out your debt. You know, like you're serving our country. That's
so you're putting your life on the line.
COVID is over. There's no emergency right now. Betsy, go ahead.
This is going to cost every taxpayer an average of $2,000. Now, that includes people who never went to college because they couldn't afford it, other people who went to college and then worked hard and scrunched to repay their loans. They're going to be on the hook so that other people don't have to repay. And, well, will this vote buying scheme work in November? It all depends on who turns out. The borrowers who now believe they've hit the jackpot, or the suckers who are being made to pay for it.
Betsy, I loved your article. Saw this in the Washington Post. I guarantee the administration will see this article. Biden's student loan plan is a regressive, expensive mistake. And then, Rick, this soundbite, again, this is Nancy Pelosi, June 2021, so a little over a year ago, on student loan forgiveness. And to Betsy's point, the power of the presidency.
That the President of the United States, is this more on the subject than you ever want to know? Will you let me know? People think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That would have to be an act of Congress.
Rick, did the Constitution change in the last 14 months? And I missed that story?
I don't think Joe Biden has really read the Constitution. Look, from a political point of view, this is a smart decision for Democrats. Obviously, as Betsy pointed out, they're buying votes. You can call them whatever you want. But at the end of the day, whether there's a legal consequence or whether these get turned back, guess what? It's going to happen after the midterm. So again, the elections are going to be impacted by a political stunt like this. That Biden will attract independents, probably moderates, and that will have some sort of impact on those midterm elections, as you're already seeing kind of the polls and numbers and the number of these races starting to tighten. So, of course, it's a brilliant political decision on Biden's part, completely irresponsible from a fiscal responsibility part, and yes, it's going to put us further in debt and further in more inflation.
Joe Biden back on the campaign trail yesterday in Maryland talking about gas prices going down, and I want you to just listen to the people cheering when he talks about gas prices going down.
Our critics say inflation. You mean the global inflation caused by the worldwide pandemic and war in Ukraine? We're making progress. Since I took office this year, gas prices are down more than $1 this summer, and we're going to keep it going down.
What are they clapping for? Betsy, so national average today, 287. Better than it was in June, okay? But that is still $1.50 more than it was on Inauguration Day. Okay, $1.50 more. It was $2.39 a gallon. What do you make of this? And are voters going to buy this before the midterm?
Most voters are too smart to believe what Joe Biden.
Are they though? They were clapping in Maryland.
Well, that's no. If you've been a politician, you know all those people there. They were gathered to support Biden. Right. They were guaranteed to clap. They would clap if he was doing handstands. Okay. Really.
All right. This caught my attention, Brianna. Gallup with a new poll out today. So Joe Biden, according to Gallup, he's got 44% approval rating. So now he's ebbing back into not-so-bad territory. The last time Gallup did a poll, beginning of the summer, he was at 38%. So he's up a little bit. Is that a sign, coupled with what happened in the New York 19th Congressional District on Tuesday, is that a sign that this might not be this massive projected red wave in November?
I'm not buying that, and especially when it comes to, you look at the New York Congressional District, I don't think that the issue at hand is abortion, right? And everyone's saying abortion's going to drive those voters to the poll. I think in relatively purple states, and I'm going to put New York in that category, wipe out New York City and Westchester. New York is red off the board. So if you take these purple states, yeah, abortion might drive voters, but it's not going to drive voters to states that are making more swing elections, and I don't think it's necessarily a bellwether for how the midterms are going to come out, because the bottom line comes down to it. Biden's approval rate may be inching up according to one poll, but there are 10,000 other polls out there that say people don't like President Biden, they don't like Kamala Harris, and they certainly don't like the Democrats. And with this new student loan debt wipeout, like Texas said, it's going to be either you're a believer or a beneficiary of the student loan wipeout, or you're one of the suckers that are going to have to pay for someone else's really bad decisions. And I think those two are going to turn out.
Good point. I think so I just want to, so here's CNN soundbite, because they're saying, well, the Maya Flores victory in Texas, the conservative media said that was a huge bellwether, and that was a win for Republicans, but all of a sudden it's not when a Republican loses in the New York 19th. The difference is Maya Flores turned a district red that had been blue for 150 years. All right, that is significant. This district, it's suburban in the south, as you said.
Home improvement doesn't have to be a puzzle. Pros like you can use Anderson 400 series windows. The clapboard windows contractors trust the most. The choice is simple. It's Anderson 400 series. The windows contractors trust the most.
And super rural and red in the north. So it goes back and forth. It teeters. It's always going to happen. All right, we will do this again. Top of the hour. Brianna Lyman, Rick Davis, second report. Thank you. Alex, over to you.
Ocean in court in Florida asking a federal judge to unseal documents related to that search, including the warrant itself and a property receipt that would detail the property that was taken from the estate. That document is generally provided from the FBI to the person who the warrant was served on. The Attorney General said a copy of that receipt was provided to former President Trump's attorneys who were there during the search in Florida, and that receipt would also detail exactly what was taken by FBI agents during that search earlier this week.
The department filed a motion to make public the warrant and receipt in light of the former president's public confirmation of the search, the surrounding circumstances, and the substantial public interest in this matter.
The Attorney General has faced mounting pressure in the last few days from Republicans and Democrats alike. This response today that we saw from the Attorney General did not provide us with additional details about the search itself or the investigation into the records. What we do know is that the search earlier this week of Mar-a-Lago was related to whether the president had taken presidential records that should have been turned over to the National Archives and possibly classified information, which would be a federal crime. The Attorney General also addressed what is becoming a growing number of threats against federal agents across the country. This comes just hours after an armed man donning body armor arrived at an FBI field office in Ohio. That man was engaged in a standoff with police after fleeing from that area. Obviously, the Attorney General very concerned about threats against FBI agents. FBI headquarters located just across the street from the Department of Justice headquarters here in Washington, where the Attorney General just spoke. And the Attorney General made very clear that the department takes all of these threats seriously and that they are unfounded, that his agents are working and are not politicized. The department is not politicized, and they are just working to do their job every day.
I am proud to be able to bring to you the #1 story in America right now. At least it should be. This is huge. Evidence again, of the FBI colluding with big tech to help Joe Biden win the 2020 election. This laptop story, remember, the New York Post broke it a couple of weeks before the election. Big tech started to censor it. Twitter, right? Facebook, listen to this, was visited by the FBI. They have specifically said, this is a bad story, you better stay away from it. Now, the big podcaster, Joe Rogan, sat down with Mark Zuckerberg, got him in a comfortable place, and maybe Zuckerberg didn't want to say this inadvertently or whatever. Take notes. This is fascinating, and it's right from the horse's mouth. Mark Zuckerberg admits to the FBI coming over and telling him what to do, and he said, "Sir, yes, sir. Go."
How do you guys handle things when they're a big news item that's controversial? Like, there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York
we have
Post.
that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. Basically the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, and some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said you can't share this at all. We didn't do that. What we do is we have, if something is reported to us as potentially misinformation, important misinformation, we also use third-party fact-checking programs. So we don't want to be deciding what's true or false. And for I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically being determined whether it was false, the distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it, you could still consume it.
The distribution was decreased.
It got shared. It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less. So fewer people saw it than would have otherwise. So it definitely but it's meaningful. But I mean, but basically, a lot of people were still able to share it. We got a lot of complaints that was the case. This is a hyper-political issue, so depending on what side of the political spectrum, you either think we didn't censor enough or censored it way too much. But we weren't sort of as black and white about it as Twitter. We just kind of thought, hey, look, if the FBI, which I still view as a legitimate institution in this country, it's like very professional law enforcement, they come to us and tell us that we need to be on guard about something, then I want to take that seriously. Did they...
Specifically say you need to be on guard about that story?
No, I don't remember if it was that specifically, but it basically said that happened.
Taking notes, I was. Right there. Specifically, did they talk about this story? No, I don't remember. He says the FBI is a legitimate institution. I don't think so anymore. I'm sorry. Here we go again. Facebook decreased distribution of the Hunter laptop story after being warned by the FBI, maybe specifically about the Hunter laptop story. Decreased distribution. How much? I don't know, but it was meaningful. Meaningful. FBI came to us, just so you know, we have it on notice, about to be a dump that's similar to 2016. Talk about 2016 some other time. How about that, huh? The guy who runs Facebook admitting it. The FBI came to visit him. No wonder why Mark Zuckerberg got on his boogie board. Do you remember that with the flag? Like he saved the country from Donald Trump? I think that was the message. Yeah, that moment, right? It's crazy. It should be the #1 story everywhere. The FBI meddling. And talk about election interference. Where's the outrage? Is Mitch McConnell going to say something about this? No. Are you concerned? Well, the quality of the Thanks a lot, Mitch. Crummy leader. How about Kevin McCarthy? These guys. Where's the passion? Where's the leadership from you guys? This midterm election should be a total layout, all right? The country is falling apart. Everybody's asleep, especially you guys. It looks to me like the far left, they are in love with abortion. They love abortion, maybe more than you guys, and maybe more than a lot of so-called conservatives love America. I love America. I believe it's worth fighting for. I believe we've got to get out there. I believe we've got to start writing checks. I'm not saying to any specific candidate, but you've got to get out there and write checks to people you support. I'm gathering I know who it is you support based on, well, you got data that tells us about that. Low voter turnout, everybody. Low voter turnout everywhere you go. People just waiting for somebody else to do the work. This is a great country. I think it's worth working for, fighting for, absolutely. Lawfully, of course, huh? Don't we have a great country? And what is our country? What is our nation, huh? United by a common descent, history, culture, language, inhabiting a particular country. All that stuff is on the line right now. You know, 6 months, a year ago, maybe it did look like it was a slam dunk that Republicans were going to take control all over again. I'm not so sure anymore. I'm not. I am. And it's okay to be a little bit edgy right now, okay? You want to fight like you're behind, and maybe we are. I don't like these fake news panel shows. I have dismissed them for a long time, especially when all of them were wrong about Donald Trump. And oh, by the way, I was right. I said he could win the day he declared for president. But this individual, who I believe is more sympathetic to the other side, made a lot of sense. Take a look.
None of us know what's going to happen. A lot of people are going to say they know what is going to happen. They are wrong. I have been wrong so many times before, and I'm likely going to be wrong right now. But I think that looking at each of these races, they are a lot closer than people would have thought in 2021, when I think a lot of Republicans thought that they'd be running on school closings and critical race theory, both of which seem like I'm referencing in movies that came out 30 years ago. And so I think that we're just not sure what's going to happen.
She's right. Hey, school closings and critical race theory, those are legitimate issues. But people move on, I guess, to the flavor of the moment, flavor of the month. Hey, here's another opportunity. If people need something, some new bright, shiny object to be mad about, this is legitimate. This crazy giveaway, even the left says it's bad. Biden's student loan announcement is a regressive, expensive mistake. Absolutely, from the Washington Post. It takes money from the broader tax base, mostly made up of workers who did not go to college, to subsidize the education debt of people with valuable degrees. It does not make sense. And you know what? All this money that's being spent, Congress didn't approve of it. Joe Biden just did it. And he thinks questions are beneath him. Look at this nasty guy.
Mr. President, is it unfair to people who hate the student loans to choose not to take out loans?
People who not own mortgages or businesses and see what these guys get more effective. Is that fair? What do you think? What about people who pay their loans for the term?
Huh? Look at that. Look at that. Nasty guy. He's not going to spend maybe $1 trillion of money that's not his, that's ours, and no questions. And how dare you ask him? Doesn't know protocol, doesn't know the law. He actually said this earlier, take a look at this. He defines politics as power. He was yelling at the reporter during the story. And whether you like it or not, young lady, he says, leaning over his desk to shake his finger at me, us cruddy politicians can take away that First Amendment of yours. He's who you want to. Yeah. He's always been dumb. Always been dumb. Anyway, back to the people where the power is supposed to be. Across the board, nobody likes this idea except the crazy people with nose rings. They suck. And some nice people have nose rings. You know what I'm talking about, though. The lefties, the far lefties, and some kids who don't know much. Take a look.
I find myself, not exactly favoring the idea of giving $10,000 in federal student loans.
I'm really not for all this. I don't think it's a good idea.
You guys struggled to repay the debt, and now you're not going to see any of the benefits.
Watch this. I can show you how to get the sweetest deals online when you shop from major retailers like Amazon and Target. You can drop prices automatically. I can show you how, but I can't do it for you. People are saving real money doing this. 160 million in the last year. Across thousands of different retailers, you'll immediately see this. See what I mean? You'll see better prices you had no idea. And you don't even need to ask. They just show up automatically. Download this free tool that'll give you access to these deals like the one I just did. Just done. That's it. Simple. It takes all of 10 seconds. No need to enter any personal information, no technical mumbo jumbo. It's that easy. What are you waiting for? It takes just 30 seconds and it's all 100% free.
If you shop on Amazon, you should use this tool. It's a browser extension that automatically compares Amazon to other sellers to see if there's a better price out there. It includes tax and shipping in that price, so you know you're really getting a great deal. Plus, it's totally free, so do yourself and your wallet if they work. Try it now.
No, not at all. I paid her college at no mortgage.
She went to college and she took care of it all on her own, by herself, loans and loans. And I'm quite proud of her for doing it. She didn't ask for a handout.
Absolutely. That's America. And they speak such sense. We don't do this here. You know where they do it? In Russia. Actually, they don't even do it in Russia anymore. They do it in the Soviet Union. I went to that place back when it was the Soviet Union. A crummy place. We don't ever want to do anything the way they did it. And now we're doing it that way. You know who had free tuition? Moscow State University. Okay? We don't want this stuff here, all right? It doesn't work. And how is this actually going to be paid? How? The White House literally doesn't have a clue.
The way that we are talking about it and what we're trying to do is the actions that we have taken in Congress with the way that the deficit has been reduced. We have taken just the last 19 months. You see that one picture giving me there. That,
responsible actions that
Wait. No. We see this. We do not see this as irresponsible.
This was in response to a direct question of how he's going to face it. He's obviously hanging around with Kamala Harris too much. That gibberish. It's amazing. I think they might just get away with it. Did they? All of it? Did they get away with it? Hell, they got away with killing a woman. Happened on television in the United States Capitol. Nobody cares. They can't even talk about it. January 6th hearings. A year of January 6th hearings. Wow, the Democrats, they are guilty of everything they accuse President Trump of. You know, President Trump wants to joke about it. Remember this?
My people are so smart. And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
No ramifications. You did it to actually happen. 596 days without justice. And how many days, by the way, is it until the midterms? Running out of time, folks. Tell your friends, write checks, and get out to vote. Coming up, that's Joe Biden with his daughter, Ashley. Don't hear too much about her, but thanks to Joe Biden, we all know that her diary is legitimate, and what she says in it is a problem for Joe. Shouldn't have made a federal case out of this one. We'll be right back with details of her diary and the crazy thing that happened about it. All right, this, of course, is career criminal and drug addict George Floyd, occasional porn star. I wish he didn't die. Unfortunate. But the overreaction was insane. Insane. Scenes like this all throughout the country and in Capitol Hill. Chuck Schumer, Steny Hoyer, Nancy Pelosi, wearing clothing she doesn't even understand, kneeling. Who else knelt? I mean, everybody did these demonstrations throughout the country, right? Oh, it felt so good. It felt so virtuous. Even the National Hockey League was against racism in hockey. And how about Roger Goodell from the Football League, the National Football League? This is the ultimate in pandering.
We, the National Football League, condemn racism and the systematic oppression of black people.
Wow, did that make you feel good to say that? Everybody hates racism, okay? But to come out there and say we are against racism, that's pandering. That's phony. And what about all the other stuff that was happening all around you at that moment, huh? Yeah, you just overlooked all that stuff, right? Now that you had your fun and you made your money and the mob left you alone, NHL, NFL, Amazon, Apple, you name it, mob didn't pick on you because you gave them money. Who's left? Who's left with the legacy? The legacy of your insanity is this. Watch.
But look in my eyes. I have not slept.
67-year-old Miriam Cintron and her neighbors live in a state of fear
They claim large gangs of young teens have been terrorizing their apartment building in the Bronx all summer. And it's getting worse.
They came at us. They beat us. They brought that stick from that tree there to beat us with the wood. We don't have no body.
63-year-old Nydia Carrero says a group of young girls the same night slammed her to the sidewalk, dragged her, and pummeled her after she refused them entry into her building. Most of the tenants here are elderly. They tell me they are being swarmed, beaten, and robbed by ruthless teens who have turned their apartment building into an oasis of lawlessness and who apparently count on their youth to spare them. As the adolescents escalate the violence night after night, residents are left bruised and traumatized.
You badmouth and delegitimize the criminal justice system, in fact, the entire history of the United States, day in and... Let's start tonight by saying happy 2-month anniversary. Yes, it's been 2 beautiful months since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and committed the country to saving the lives of our most vulnerable, at least in some states, not snuffing them out, which is happening in a lot of other states. With that in mind, the media is here to save the day. Yes, college students return to campus without access to abortion. Oh, the horror! To address this, I'll need some help from my favorite documentary, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Oh, did someone want to pretend to be an adult on their own and murder a bunch of infants? Or did you? Where? Now, you'll have to fail out of a women's studies degree without slaughtering babies. Oh, oh no. Oh, someone's going to have to get through that frat party with a condom this time. Oh, the horror. We feel so sad for you. And I say again, happy 2-month anniversary for the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Remember, you can get your 624-22 merch at StuDoesMerch.com. Use the code STU10 to get 10% off your order. BlazeTV.com/Stu. The promo code is Stu to save $10 off your subscription. If you're watching this video on YouTube, click like right now. I mean, I don't want to force you, but I'm just saying it would be a good time to do it. Glenn Beck joins us today. He's going to bring, which I can only describe as some porn with him, which is not comforting. We'll round up yesterday's primary election results for you, but we start by doing Biden's bribery, and this is basically what we're looking at today. Joe Biden is trying to bribe you into voting for him. He knows he's got a catastrophe potentially around the corner with the election, and he's trying to buy off as many people as possible to minimize the damage. That is the long and the short of this. That is what he is doing. He tweeted this today: in keeping with my campaign promise, my administration is announcing a plan to give working and middle-class families breathing room as they prepare to resume federal student loan payments in January 2023. I'll have more details this afternoon. Here's the plan. Are you ready for it? It's pretty exciting. You get $20,000 off your debt if you went to college on Pell Grants, which is a big chunk of the country. $10,000 if you didn't receive Pell Grants. So you got the grant and you're getting even more. Okay. Forgiveness only applies to those earning less than $125,000. Your student loan pause. Now remember, people haven't been paying student loans for multiple years now, but that pause is going to supposedly be extended only one more time, a final time, to December 31st, 2022. And if you have undergraduate loans, you can cap the repayment at 5% of your monthly income. There's a lot more to it than even what they tweeted. We talked about what this thing would cost. Really didn't take into account all the additional crap he piled in at the end, but it's going to be very, very expensive. And there's a bunch of reasons why this is bad. Number one is it's unfreaking constitutional. Okay? It's unconstitutional. This is not how our system of government operates. The President of the United States does not just get to
on a whim, spend $300 billion. That is absolutely not how this country is constructed. That's not how this works at all. Charles C.W. Cook wrote about this. He said, if he did this is right before it was passed, or I can't say it was passed because it wasn't passed, but right before he announced it, it would represent a middle finger to the Constitution, which vests legislative power in Congress, not the president. It would represent a middle finger to Congress, which has not given the executive branch the authority to give $10,000 each to millions of college students. Because that's not how any of this works, guys. You're supposed to actually go through the process a little bit. And that's another reason why you can't do this. It's illegal, okay? It is illegal. That's a problem. Now, the authority they claim to be able to do this comes from this just rigor, which I went through earlier today, 20 U.S. Code 1087A. The authority and how to go through, there's a bunch of crap in here. How to go through and can you forgive loans. And there are some reasons given in the law that you can overturn loans. You know, there's a few of them. But they're all spelled out very specifically. It's not everyone under an income level. That's not in there. This is just totally made up out of whole cloth. We know this because no short a figure of stature on the left, as Nancy Pelosi even outlined for us. This is just a year ago. She was out in front of everybody saying, "Hey guys, you can't do it this way."
People think that the President of the United States, is this more on the subject than you ever want to know? Will you let me know? People think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
Could you be any clearer on this? This is the least drunk she's ever sounded. And here she is getting completely ignored. Now, I have not heard any journalist go up to Nancy Pelosi and say, "Hey, remember what you said about how we couldn't do that? Do you still believe this?" Because I'm sure she's got some justification now to completely back off of what she said just earlier. But, like, what if the Biden administration, itself were to come out and say, "Hey, we can't do this"? Well, shockingly, they tried to get authority to do it this way earlier. They asked the Department of Education, and here's what they got. For these reasons, we believe that the Secretary does not have statutory authority to provide blanket or mass cancellation, compromise, discharge, or forgiveness of student loan principal balances, and or to materially modify the repayment amounts or terms thereof, whether due to COVID-19, the pandemic, or for any other reason. This is not some right-wing source. This is Nancy Pelosi and the Biden Department of Education saying, "No, you can't do this." Did Biden care? No, he's doing it anyway because he is knowingly breaking the law and knowingly violating the Constitution. Now, if you go back and you look at the history of what impeachment was supposed to be for, you will find it is specifically this type of instance. Not, did he make a phone call to Ukraine? Not even, hey, do you think, he had sex with an intern? Not even January 6th. What they really were focusing on was when executive leadership decided to completely ignore the Constitution and ignore standing law. That was one of the big things impeachment was supposed to be used for. Yes, we all know the crimes and misdemeanors part of it, but this was all, when they discussed this and how it would be utilized, this is the type of thing that they brought up. Now, I am under no appearances that there's not going to be an impeachment, certainly now, of Joe Biden over this. But when the Republicans get in, I mean, if they do in this election, something to think about. Because he's just outwardly ignoring the Constitution and law. And he did it before. He ignored the Supreme Court with the eviction ban stuff, and now he's doing it again here. This guy does not care about constitutional law and order. He does not care. And that's a big problem from the President of the United States. So what other problems do we have with this loan forgiveness plan? Well, it screws over people who actually decided to pay their loan. Is that you? Are you that dumb? Were you so stupid that you thought maybe you should work hard? Maybe you should save your money. Maybe you should make your payments on time. Are you that dumb? Are you one of those dumb people who thought maybe if you did the right things, you'd be rewarded for it? Oh, what a country you thought you lived in. Well, you don't live there anymore, okay? That's how, if you paid off your loans, you're a sucker. That is exactly what the Biden administration is telling you. And this is the type of thing that was brought up to none other than Elizabeth Warren not so long ago. What?
I was going to ask one question. My daughter's getting out of school. I saved all my money. She doesn't have any student loan. Am I going to get my money back? So you're going to pay for people who didn't save any money, and those of us who did the right thing get screwed. My buddy had fun, bought a car, went on vacation. I saved my money. He made more than I did. But I worked a double shift, worked extra. My daughter worked 10. So you're right. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. We did the right thing, and we get screwed. That's right.
What a dummy, huh? I guess that's how we're supposed to think about that. This guy who worked his ass off, worked 2 jobs, paid off all of his loans, while his friends went on vacation, while his friends bought the boat. While all that was going on, he worked hard to pay off his loans because he thought that was the responsibility to do. And now, the result of that is he's the idiot. He's the moron. People like Elizabeth Warren want to make the people who spent money on vacations and boats into the winners. So they get to spend all their money the whole time, and then when they weren't responsible to pay back that loan, they get it completely forgiven. And we'll get into the word forgiven in a second. That's not right. But not only does it screw over people who paid their loans off already, it also screws over people who never took out loans. A lot of people, our own Glenn Beck, he's coming up here in just a little while, couldn't go to college because he couldn't afford it. You know, despite what the left says, the guy's pretty smart. And he wound up getting accepted to classes. He went to Yale. Later on in life, though, couldn't go at the beginning because he didn't have any money. He was poor, okay? He didn't have any money, and he didn't have any money to take out loans. And he said, you know what? Instead of getting a bunch of debt on my ledger, I'm going to instead work hard and try to earn enough money to make it my own way. He didn't get the advantages of being in college. He didn't get that accreditation bonus. He didn't get any of that. He just worked really hard and did what he could to get through. A lot of people went that route. Think of it this way: like you're working at Subway with your friend back in high school, and your friend decides to go to college. He's got a big loan, owes bunch of money. You instead say, hey, you know, I kind of like working at Subway. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep working here and then eventually take out a loan and buy my own franchise. And you buy your own franchise and you work as hard as you can and you're doing what you can to pay that loan back. He went to college. He's screwed off of college, getting drunk and hooking up, while you're working at Subway making, you know, Italian delights. And what happens? You get any relief from that loan? No. You, who are actually doing something for people, serving them sandwiches that they want, you get nothing. But your friend who went to college and is doing shots of Jägermeister, he's getting paid back for loans. Does that seem fair to you? Does that seem fair to anybody? Apparently it does. Ben Shapiro had a crazy idea. He's way off base here. I don't know where he came up with this. I have a controversial idea about paying off student loan debt. Don't take out debt you will likely be unable to pay off, and don't ask others to pay off your debts. That's a crazy take. It's a crazy take. This is like when we went back to that period where everyone was saying things like predatory loans. What the hell is a predatory loan? Someone loaning you money is a predatory situation. You have to go there, ask for it, and then sign for it. That's not predatory. Our heads are backwards. The people who do things right, the people who don't take giant risks, the people who go through life trying to do their best and stay within the lines and play by the rules, those people are the ones that get screwed. Remember the Forgotten Man? We talked about this back in the Tea Party era quite a bit. The guy who just kind of sits back there. He's not the poorest among us. He's not the richest among us. He's just sitting there facilitating all of his money going away to pay for everything else. That guy's the Forgotten Man. Well, how can this case be any clearer of evidence of that phenomenon? And I will say this isn't a big group, but it also screws over people who haven't taken out loans yet. If you're going to college, you better sign up for that loan right now. You've got to the end of the year. If you're going next year, well, it's after the election, so you get nothing. This is a one-time deal. If you happen to be in the nice window where you weren't too early, so your loans are paid off, and you're not too late, so they haven't started yet, you have to be right in the middle where they're kind of paid off, and then you get a bunch of free cash that is unconstitutional and illegal. Does this make a lot of sense? Does it make a lot of sense in this day and age, considering the fact that we're in an inflationary period, because this is going to cause inflation? Yes, it will. Biden's student loan plan for caught in inflation-based crosshairs, says the Hill. And of course, that's true because when you decide to spend a bunch of money that we don't have on whatever this plan is, you're going to continue to further along these problems. You can't spend $740 billion without causing some inflation. You can't spend $280 billion on the CHIPS Act. You can't spend $1.9 trillion on the COVID. You can't spend $1.1 trillion on the infrastructure plan, and you can't spend $300 billion or more on this plan without fueling inflation again. Larry Summers, who called the inflation from the COVID relief plan, the one that Biden did, has been mentioning this again. He says student loan relief, debt relief spending, that raises demand and increases inflation. It consumes resources that could be better used, helping those who did not, for whatever reason, have the chance to attend college. It will also tend to be inflationary by raising tuitions. And what's hilarious about this is there is no area of our economy where you see consistent inflation like the inflation that you see in our universities. Why is this? Let's look at the numbers. Overall, inflation from January 2000 to June 2021 is up about 60.1%. You see the line on the chart, the horizontal line there. All these lines going way above that line, up into the 140, 160% area. College tuition and fees and college textbooks. I also leave hospital services on there. Why? Because all of these have massive government pieces of their funding. A lot of the money that goes to these things come from the government. And of course, the government is backing these loans. So why wouldn't you jack the cost of a loan up? If you're going to get a job that is going to pay you $40,000 a year, and you go and the cost of college is $200,000, most people would say that's kind of a bad investment. Maybe you shouldn't go to that college. But you know what? The college doesn't care because it knows all of these loans are backed with no sensibility whatsoever by the U.S. government. So they can do whatever they want. They get all of their money. This debt cancellation doesn't mean that the college isn't getting their money. No, no. It doesn't mean that the United States government isn't getting its money. No, no. It means that you're paying it. Here is, by the way, if you want to look, just to give you a clear highlight of this, let me give you all the things on this chart. This is the entire chart. A bunch of squiggly lines. I'll help you out if you're on podcast, or if it's a little too small for you to watch it on podcast. At the very top, you see hospital services, college tuition fees, and college textbooks. These are things that have inflated more than anything else in our economy. Below that, medical care service and child and nursery school. What are you noticing about those things? What are you noticing about all of these things? These are things that are heavily influenced by government subsidy. Hourly wages, housing, food and beverages are the other things. What about the other stuff at the bottom? New cars, household furniture, clothing, cell phone services, computer software, toys, TV. None of those things are subsidized by the government. At least mostly. There is an Obama phone or two stuck in there, but generally speaking, your cell phone is not typically paid for by the government. And what I'm saying there is that when you put in a plan like this, where you spend tons and tons of money in guarantee loans, you are an idiot if you don't jack up prices. These universities get lots of blame. What the heck should they be doing? Of course they're going to jack up prices. They know that people will pay anything because they don't care. It's not real money. You go in there with a well below market rate for borrowing, and then at the end of the day, when you get down towards the end of your payments, they just clear it all out for you. Does that make any sense? Canceling student debt would undo the Reconciliation Bill's deficit reduction. This is great because the Inflation Reduction Act, not inflation, reduce inflation. is now, of course, going to be wiped out by this. Why? Well, here it is. For giving $10,000 for each borrower with income below $125,000 would add $330 billion to the deficit. This would wipe out the purported deficit reduction from the Democrats' reconciliation bill, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that law would reduce the deficit by $305 billion over the next 10 years. Got that? So basically, the whole thing that was being sold by the media, that this was going to take out our debt, it was going to lower our debt, it was going to be a responsible bill. Before any of the pieces of that bill are enacted, they've already spent all the money. All of it. It's all gone. With a strike of a pen today from stupid Joe Biden. It's already all gone. And can we take on the media here for one freaking second? It is absolute media malpractice how this happens all the time. They act as if that $300 billion that was going to be saved from the Inflation Reduction Act was real, when we all knew that almost immediately they would spend that money on something else. Everybody knows it because they do it every time. They don't always do it with a strike of a pen a week later. Sometimes they wait like a month. Sometimes they wait 2 months. But they always do it. And the fact that we had to sit through months of listening to their bullcrap about how this was going to lower the deficit, and then, as we all knew, what happens 2 weeks later, they spend all of the money they supposedly saved from this bill. It was always fake. We said it was fake from the beginning, but nobody in the media would tell you the truth. It is an absolute disgrace. So what else is wrong with this? It's helping the most privileged. Look, I don't like government spending. I don't want 90% of the programs we have. But if we're going to have a program that is going to spend tons and tons of your money, it should at least go to the most needy people out there. People maybe in poverty. Or the diseased orphan found on the street corner. Okay, can we spend it there? No. We have to spend it on people who have the highest incomes and who have the highest prospects for income, and in addition to that, have the lowest unemployment rate. Does this make any sense at all? Logan Dobson tweets, saying the debt is canceled means that it makes it seem victimless. It just goes away. It doesn't. They're making you pay for it instead of the people who took out the loan. Charles C.W. Cook responds, yeah, this is correct. The people with the lowest unemployment rate in the country took out the loans, spent them, and received a product for the money. Joe Biden intends to violate his oath of office to transfer the liability for repayment to the people who didn't do any of that. And that's our last point here. It is not debt forgiveness, it's redistribution of wealth. If I were to take out a loan, and I were to take out a loan from Glenn is going to loan me some money. And then after a month he said, hey Stu, you're the greatest guy in the world, you don't have to pay me back. That's loan. Okay? Because the hit is going to Glenn, who's loaning out the money. In this case, that's not what happens at all. The college is going to get their money. The government is going to get their money. The person who borrowed the money isn't going to have to pay it back. You're going to have to pay it back. You're the person who had nothing to do with this at all. The person who's at home doing their thing, working their ass off, you're going to have to take money out of your bank account, and you're going to have to give it to people who you don't know, who took out loans to go to college and can't pay their loans back, despite the fact that they're paying like 1% of a loan. How is this possibly make any sense to anyone? It is a terrible violation of whatever unity we're supposed to have as a country. You don't. When you take out a loan, you take out a loan with some sort of idea of how that's going to play out. And you're going to go to college. You're going to pay it back over a long period of time. There are a million different ways to defer your loans, to delay the payments. You're paying under market rates. Everything is set up in the favor of someone who's taken out a college loan. And you might say, well, I didn't get a good enough job. Some people didn't, That sucks, honestly. And those people probably just need to pay for that with their credit. That's what the credit system's for. We already have a system that handles all of this. But to ask people from all across the country to pool their money to pay back the loan that you took out is disgraceful. It's disgraceful. And you know what? If you're the one getting back the $10,000, as many people in the audience will, because many people are stuck with these loans and don't hit these income limits, it's not your fault. You didn't even ask for it. It'll be great to get some money back from the government, but the bottom line is other people are going to have to pay for it. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, you know what else thinks is ridiculous? The NAACP president. He bashes the Biden's recorded plans on student debt relief. And this, he's basically saying didn't go far enough. The NAACP says, if you don't go far enough, you're actually only helping white people and not helping black people. Now that, I will say his analysis of this is not very good. But when the NAACP came and complained about Joe Biden's bill, you know what Joe Biden's response was? It's this. The white power symbol. He gave the white power symbol in the middle of the speech. Not only does Joe Biden not know how to be president, not only is he senile, not only is he spending all of your money and causing inflation, ruining the economy and everything else is spending, he's also a white supremacist. Day out for 2 years, this is the aftermath, okay? Nobody has respect for law enforcement, for the country. One of the most pernicious, these lies about America in communities of color. In communities of color. I feel for those people. Roger Goodell, I'm sure you felt really great. You're still making your money. Why don't you go visit that neighborhood in the Bronx, huh? Your virtue signaling everybody's led to this harm. This harm. Next on their list, bad enough they ruined safety in the streets. How about they ruined medicine? At one point, healthcare in America, well, it was the envy of the world. I don't know if it's going to be like that for much longer. I mean, state-of-the-art care is still available here, but doctors are not going to be selected for aptitude or skill. No. University of California, San Francisco has a stated mission, okay? Excellence in medicine, not so much. A multi-year, multifaceted School of Medicine initiative designed to make UCSF the most diverse, equitable, and inclusive academic medical system in the country. What's next on their agenda, please? We monitor diversity and inclusion with regular reports on campus efforts, campus climate, and campus progress. Doctors have got to stick to being doctors or learning how to be good doctors, okay? Oh, we don't want mistakes in the operating room. We don't care what you look like, all right? This is so dangerous. It's... Please stop. How do we get them to stop? Stop this insanity. All right, gotta talk about this for a minute. Ashley Biden. I feel mildly guilty about this, actually, because, well, I've read through her diary. Her father made it a federal law. What? I read it. Now, here's the deal. Amy and, what's her name again? Amy Harris and Robert Kurlander. They're from Florida, and they just pled guilty. I don't understand how this works. They pleaded guilty in the fact that Ashley Biden's diary, they could face up to 5 years behind bars. My understanding is they found it in a house that Ashley Biden had vacated. I don't understand how it's theft. But anyway, they turned it over to a publication, and they actually published it. Joe, I think this is coming from Joe, clearly wanted this a federal case, wanted somebody punished for leaking Ashley Biden's diary. Next, Ashley and Joe. Here's why Joe should have kept it quiet, okay? Ashley and Joe Biden. In the diary, Ashley writes about Joe, okay? And now we know it's a legitimate diary. And I'm going to read from it right now. Sorry, Joe, you made this happen, not me. But there's a silver lining here. So Ashley writes this. As an adult, we believe this was written in the last 4 years or so, that she was hypersexualized at a young age. What is this due to? Was I molested? I think so. I can't remember specifics. But I do remember the trauma. In the very same paragraph, she writes, next please, I remember at a young age having sex with friends. Showers with my dad. Probably not appropriate. Joe, I think you might have an issue here.
He's the highest paid employee in our federal government. And beginning in the spring of 2020, Dr. Fauci began to set national policy that affected the way that 330 million Americans lived their lives.
For goodness sakes, I'm telling you, wear a mask, keep social distancing. There's nothing political about that.
But who is Anthony Fauci?
People who have conspiracy theories. Those are people that don't particularly care for me.
In this short series, we will do what the establishment media have refused to do. We will give you an unvarnished look at the career of the most powerful politician in America, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Don't you think it's time that you step down and let someone else who has a more effective message?
Actually, no.
My name is Dalton Caldwell, and I'm a first officer on the Embraer 175 for Envoy Air.
My name is John Nelson, and I am an Envoy Cadet instructor.
My name is Ricardo Mata. I'm an American Airlines first officer on the Airbus 320.
I knew I wanted to be a pilot shortly after taking my first GA flight with my stepfather. We had the Piper Aztec, and he took me up flying and flew over the top of my high school and the football field, the track, and everything. After that, I was hooked. I knew that I wanted to do that as a career.
My neighbor is the captain of American Airlines on the 787, and he urged me to start in aviation. And once I took my first Discovery flight, I loved it.
I was born in Maracaibo, Venezuela. And my dad being an airline pilot and my mom being a flight attendant. So my entire life I wanted to be a pilot. I came to the United States when I was 18 years old. Eventually became a restaurant manager. And I did that for about 10 years. I really wanted to get back to flying. So I got my private pilot license. A year later, I applied to ATP and I started ATP in Raleigh, North Carolina.
So I started looking at flight schools with the overall reviews, and from what my neighbor, who is a captain of American Airlines, had been telling me, and from other first officers that he had flown with, it seemed that ATP was the best route.
My entire dream have always been, other than being a pilot, was always to be a pilot for American Airlines. I found that ATP was going to be the fastest to get to where I wanted to be.
So I came into ATP with a private credit, got my private in high school. At ATP, I completed my instrument rating all the way through my C.
Joe and Ashley, hey, this is bad news, folks. Bad news. Joe, you never should have made a federal case out of this. I don't know what's going on in that family, okay? It's big problems. Something else in this diary, though, and I want to speak. I know it's crazy. She's probably never going to hear this, or maybe she will. Ashley wrote this. You will have all you desire. Trust the process. Trust yourself and your ability to manifest all your dreams. You got this. Ashley Blazer Spotty. Now, some of the addictions that she had, that she writes about, I know that. All right? I've been there. Ashley, I don't think you can do this on your own. I couldn't do it on my own. There is a way out. You know, your father brags about knowing the book. Forget about all that stuff, okay? You, God, and Jesus. They tell me your family is Christian. The world has so corrupted everybody's view of the faith. Don't believe any of those lies, okay? There's an answer, and it's not, your answer will not come from writing in a journal. It'll come from reading this book, okay? This book, it saved my life, especially this one. The Charles Stanley Life Bible. It's a King James Bible, but it's got a couple of footnotes in there and some explainers that just help you. I hate it already. That's not a funny joke, right? It's a good joke. You know the most offensive part so far? Hillary and Chelsea Clinton being the executive producers of this production. What the hell do they know? This stuff is actually, there's a lot that goes into it. They don't know what they're doing. I know they don't know what they're doing.
Knock something down.
Here's a little bit more. You gotta be woke with Apple TV, right? And what's woker than making fun of white people? That always works, especially among liberal white people. All right, let's wrap this up. It's getting on my nerves. By putting down the bad things and up with the good things, one with yourself. What a totally useless message. I think the better message is the one that I talked about a couple of moments ago. Okay, why doesn't anybody talk about the greatest message in the world? I'm serious, why not? It's the greatest message in the world, and they pretend that beads and candles are going to get you somewhere. All right, fake news. If you are just operating your life and you got the TV on the background, you're going to hear stuff like this all the time.
Ben Rhodes, Neil brought the Bill Barr just as far into the conversation, and so I want to stay there. One of the things, we keep talking about being in uncharted territory as a country, covering a search approved by a judge of an ex-president's home. Not the what of it, but why? Because he had classified materials that could endanger U.S. national
So that's a
security.
former Bush administration official asking a Obama administration official, by the way.
Boxes around, but repackaging some of the materials that may or may not be classified. It makes me
Oh, just ask your
want to know
question.
more about what he was protected from while he was there, about how these agencies functioned when he was in this much trouble but had all the protections of the executive. What do you think when you see this investigation start to the tip of the iceberg reveal itself?
I'm really glad you asked that question, Nicole, because this is what I've been thinking about the last couple of days. Because, you know, for 8 years I was in a White House with the highest security.
All right. I'm sorry I did this. I'm sorry. Look, here. He goes on for 4 minutes talking about how bad Trump is with no evidence of anything. All rumor, speculation. It's just like Russia all over again. And it's fascinating to me. The swamp, bipartisan, they agree. This is a former Obama guy. The girl with the hair, that's a former Bush administration official. This is how they roll. They don't want anybody outside their world in their world, okay? All right. Hey, remember him?
Safety adherence to the rule of law is the bedrock principle of the Justice Department and of our democracy. Upholding the rule of law means applying the law evenly, without fear or favor.
I don't believe you. I do not believe this man whatsoever. Do you know who he's appointed to a very high position in his Justice Department? This crazy woman. Do you remember her? Pamela Carlin. She was a quote-unquote expert witness during one of these hearings against Donald Trump. Still don't remember her? Maybe you remember this.
One example that shows you the difference between prince and a king, which is the Constitution says there can be no titles of nobility. So while the president can name his son Baron, he can't make him a baron.
All right, just a good old-fashioned Trump hater. Well, she knew nothing, said that. What did they give her? They made her the principal deputy assistant attorney general for that performance in the Biden administration. Yeah, I like that better. That picture's better. How about that, huh? Fear or favor, or just following the facts. I don't believe.
My moderate to severe plaque psoriasis, the burning, itching, the pain.
Emerge Tremfiant. With Tremfya, most people saw 90% clear skin at 16 weeks. The majority of people saw 90% clear skin even at 5 years.
Serious allergic reactions may occur. Tremfya may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, or if you had a vaccine or plan to.
Emerge Tremfiant with Tremfya. Ask your doctor about Tremfya today.
Stop being so nice to women. Nice will never equal turned on or attracted to you. I know you want women to be wildly attracted to you, to approach you first, to win at the dating game and beat out all the other jerks around. But it's not going to happen if you keep being so darn nice. What if I told you I have a formula that stops you from being too nice and has you being just the right back? A formula that you can use to empower any woman anywhere. And it's no matter how attractive or something she is. We women, due to our biological wiring, cannot resist a man who uses his formula subconsciously or even by accident. This amazing formula I'm talking about is called the F formula. And it has absolutely nothing to do with good looks, height, status, money or luck. It has nothing to do with the numbers game or approaching 50 different women so you can hopefully get one of them interested in you. That is a complete waste of time, so please stop doing it. The F formula involves tapping into a woman's primal brain and pushing just the right buttons, which forces her to feel uncontrollably attracted to you. And it's surprisingly easy for any guy to do if he just knows how. Now, I can say from personal experience that this formula works on me like magic. Prove this works on many women, all types of women. We arranged to have this tested with thousands of women to make sure it's 100% effective. And as a result, I can confidently say without any guesswork, the F formula just plain works. The few men who use this formula spark instant chemistry with any woman they choose, and they have women laughing at their jokes, flirting with them, and craving to escalate to the next level, whether that's date, or something else. On the other hand, the majority of guys are unaware of this formula and do not use this formula. Unfortunately, it becomes or worse, the creepy guy zone. So if you want to be one of the few men who effortlessly get women attracted, aroused, and eager to escalate to the next level, I would be very happy to teach you the F formula. All you have to do is click the button on your screen right now, somewhere. I've already made a free video for you revealing what the F formula is and what it's all about. This video is not going to be available forever because if every guy on the street discovered this formula, it would lose its mind. So, if you want to check it out now is the best time. Just click the button and you can watch the video now.
Neither should you. Be very careful when you consume mainstream media content. They may tell you stuff that may or may not be right, including when it comes to addiction. I'm not going to get into the story they did on NBC News, but I will say this about addiction. They help make addicts in America. NBC did. When Hoda and Jenna and Kathy Lee before drank in the morning. Oh, it's every day's wine's day or whatever, the white wine in the morning routine. Bad, bad, bad. They drank. It didn't even matter if they were drinking or not. It was a symbolism. Daydreaming. Fun, right? Thanks for nothing. Thanks for nothing. All right, do me a favor. Stay with us. We are going to have coming up. Sad. It's a year ago since that horrible attack in Afghanistan killed 13 service members. Kareem Nakui on the left lost his life that day, just 20 years old. We're going to meet his mom.
Without meaningful effect on inflation. Let's be clear. I hear it all the time. How do we pay for it? We pay for it by what we've done. Last year we cut the deficit by more than $350 billion. Bullshit. This year we're on track to cut it by more than $1.7 billion by the end of this fiscal year. The single largest deficit reduction in a single year in the history of America. In the Inflation Reduction Act, we cut it by another $300 billion over the next decade because Medicare will be paying less for prescription drugs. And over $1 trillion added out for the next 2 decades. The point is this. There's plenty of deficit reduction to pay for the program, cumulative deficit reduction to pay for the program in time. I will never apologize for helping Americans working America, especially not to the same folks who voted for a $2 trillion tax cut that mainly benefited the wealthiest Americans and the biggest corporations, that slowed the economy, didn't do a whole lot for economic growth, and wasn't paid for, and racked up this enormous deficit. Just as we've never apologized when the federal government forgave almost every single cent of over $700 billion in loans to hundreds of thousands of small businesses across America. No one complained that those loans caused inflation. A lot of these folks in small businesses are working in middle-class families. They needed help. It was the right thing to do. So the outrage over helping working people with student loans, I think is just simply wrong, dead wrong. Third thing, fixing the student loan program system itself. We've talked about this at length. This is really important. We're proposing to make what's called an income-driven repayment plan simple and fair. Here's how. No one with an undergraduate loan today or in the future, whether for community college or four-year college, will have to pay more than 5% of their discretionary income to repay their loan. That's income after you pay the necessities like housing, food, and life. You currently pay 10%. We're cutting that in half to 5%. And after you pay your loan for 20 years, your obligation will be fulfilled if it hadn't already been fulfilled, meaning you won't have to pay any more, period. For borrowers, the original balance was less than $12,000, many of whom are community college students, will be done paying just after 10 years. These children save more than $1,000 a year on average. It's a game changer. We're also fixing what's called, and this has been a bane of driving me crazy when I was out of office, public service loan forgiveness program. Now, this program forgives student loans to encourage those students who have those loans if they go and do public service. Think of the millions who are public school teachers, local police officers, workers at local charities, members of the military and the National Guard, and so many more. Think of the folks who work for federal, state, local, tribal governments, keeping essential services going, responding to natural disasters, all those firefighters and cops. The program is designed so that if you serve in one of these jobs,
That's no great. Okay.
Stop by America's #1 brakes destination today.
All right, welcome to Rob Schmidt Tonight. There's never been a more outwardly phony presidency than Joe Biden's. The administration that's paralyzing this country with nonstop race baiting and divisive rhetoric is led by a president who spoke at a KKK funeral and once said he doesn't want his kids growing up in a racial jungle. And now this same administration is making a blatantly pandering to young people in debt because its leaders spent his entire political career making their lives worse by protecting big banks. Blue-collar Scranton Joe was one of the most pitiful makeovers in the history of politics. Joe Biden is really a shameless Delaware political elite, decades in bed with the major banks and financial institutions who headquarter in Biden's tiny state with tax purposes. From The Intercept, Biden played a role in making it easier for students and parents to take out burdensome loans spanning across several decades. Later, his landmark bankruptcy reform legislation made it nearly impossible to discharge student loans, furthering a predatory industry and sinking millions into unsustainable levels of debt. No big deal. Biden helped create all of this debt and then helped make it easier for banks to harass borrowers, kids with a college degree, in a predatory manner. In 1978, Biden supported the Middle Income Student Assistance Act, which eliminated income restrictions on federal loans to expand eligibility to all students. Biden helped write a separate bill that year blocking students from seeking bankruptcy protections on those loans after graduation. Don't act surprised. This is textbook Biden politics. The man has spent 40 years gutting the American middle class and helping his son get rich so he can afford hotels in L.A. for cookies and meal. That's the real Joe Biden, not the senile Trojan horse dragged across the finish line in 2020 by Obama's deep state architects, and certainly not the Biden that we saw.
To do anything about this fraud. My administration is taking it on.
Fakest man in politics right now, and that is saying a lot. So before we continue eviscerating this idiotic plan from this pathetically desperate administration, let's break it down for a second. $10,000 in forgiveness for anyone making under $125,000 a year. You get $20,000 knocked off, you have no lower income. and also extending the payment freeze on student loans, of course, until right after the midterm elections. A blatantly political act. And if you were surprised when Biden announced that he was spending $300 billion more of your dollars to cancel other people's debt, maybe you should be. Because it wasn't that long ago that Democrats told us that this can't happen, that frankly it's illegal. Here's Nancy Pelosi not that long ago.
People think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That to be an act of Congress.
Liz Warren was on CNN today. Check out the picture. She was asked about criticism from Republicans like Mitch McConnell, who point out the anger from responsible Americans who paid off their own student loan debt and now have to pay for someone else's. Warren had her fake TV smile up, so you know you're about to get a spectacular line of BS. Enjoy.
Look, I'm not at all surprised that Mitch McConnell is attacking this. And the reason he's attacking it is because it is very, very popular. Popular among Democrats, independents, Republicans, popular.
It's incredibly popular, Liz Warren.
What does a Worlds of Fun Gold Pass get you? A summer of fun? More like seasons of fun. You get unlimited visits this year. Whoa! And unlimited visits next year. All at Worlds of Fun. For the fun of it.
Says, in fact, it's so popular that it has to be forcibly implemented on you illegally via executive order at a time when Democrats control both houses of Congress. That's how friggin' popular this thing is. Not even every Democrat will support it. Liz Warren is one of the most soulless liars Democrats have. That's her superpower, the kind of person who can pretend to be Native American to get ahead in life. She'll say just about anything. She couldn't care less. So why is this bill in actuality so unpopular? Well, first off, because it is ridiculous. The Education Data Initiative says that Americans with above average income owe an estimated 65% of America's student loan debt. Think about that. The vast majority of this is going to go to people that are doing pretty well. Doctors, lawyers, finance people with MBAs making six figures. Here's a free $10,000 from your government. Go get yourself a nice new Rolls. Warren and company know this thing had no chance in Congress. It would have never stood up to the kind of scrutiny that we are delivering right now. Even Manchin and Sinema were sure to be nose on this thing. And there would have been defectors in the House as well. $300 billion in new spending, more spending for a country riddled with debt and fighting rampant inflation. These people cannot stop spending your money. They've spent $30 trillion we don't have, and they just want to keep going. It was just last month when Democrats bragged about their Inflation Reduction Act, which in reality was just a climate change bill. It was a gift to rich liberal donors in the green energy business. They sold it as inflation reduction because it raised $700 billion in new taxes over 10 years, but only gave away $400 billion of that to Biden's rich donors, meaning that there was $300 billion left over in deficit reduction, even though in reality, they're still spending more than they're bringing. But that's deficit reduction. Well, it only took a few weeks, and they've already wasted that $300 billion on this plan. Think about that. They've already wasted it. The $700 billion is now gone with this new act. It is amazing to watch how these people spend. Texas Congressman Chip Roy joins us now. It's good to have you on tonight. So you listened to the president today like we all did. Fire away on this. Your thoughts.
Well, what do I say to my staffer who went to a college that wasn't her first choice so that it would be more affordable, took out some loans, worked her way through college, had a few loans, then did all the right stuff, paid her loans off, is now debt-free? What do I tell her? Because I can tell you what Biden is telling her, screw you. What do I tell the plumber who worked his way through starting a business but didn't take out student loans, and now the government is going to give a $10,000 handout to all these student loan holders? What do I say to him? Because Biden is saying, screw you. What do I say to the GI Bill recipient who sacrificed to serve their country and then came back and took advantage of the GI Bill? What do I say to him or her? Well, screw you, because that's what Biden said. Look, this is all about handouts for people who have gender studies degrees or sociology degrees and living in their parents' basements and sitting on social media, crying and wailing about social justice and woke garbage. I'm sick of this stuff. The American people are sick of this stuff. This is the same philosophy that has the IRS agents who are now going to be going after hardworking Americans, the FBI agents who are targeting parents who dare challenge the education establishment, and now we're going to fund the very nonsense that are being led by an education and academia and universities that are polluting the minds of our children. American people have had enough of it. I'm hearing lots of anger among the American people about this policy, and we need to do something to reverse it as Republicans, not just whine about it.
And how are they allowed to even do this? Even Pelosi said, we played in the monologue that they cannot do this. They could not do this without Congress. How is this even happening?
Yeah, well, this is a continued abuse of executive power. One of the first things I did in Congress was introduce legislation to try to yank back on executive power and bring it back to Congress. This is an abuse from the law passed in the wake of the 9/11 and in the wake of our invasion in Iraq that was designed to try to give some flexibility, and now it's going to be abused to allow the automatic payment and writing a check of $10,000 to some, $20,000 to others. I think it is dubiously lawful. Now we've got to try to find people who are standing to challenge it in court. But the biggest thing we could do is have a Republican Congress who can find their cojones and actually pledge to say, we will not rest until we stop this, defund it, end it, and do not accept this. We should reverse this policy. We should fight this policy. Don't hide behind, so-and-so's already got benefit. We should undo this policy and make sure that we stop allowing the federal government empowering these bureaucrats to destroy over the American people.
Yeah. It's funny that the NAACP is actually angry about this. They try to pander and they don't even get that out of this. The president, Derek Johnson, writing a statement: if the rumors are true, which we know they are, we got a problem. Tragically, we've experienced this many times before. This is not how you treat black voters who turned out in record numbers and provided 90% of their vote to once again save democracy in 2020. So it's funny to see how they haven't gone nearly far enough. So you're ticking off everybody that had to pay for college that's already done with it, and then you're not giving enough to everybody on the other side. Who are they capitulating?
Yeah, well, they're capitulating to. They're radical left white voters who are Ivy League graduates and college graduates, frankly, the same kind who I'd be happy to deport out of the United States in exchange for scores of supposed brown people that I'm supposed to apparently oppose, while they allow people to get abused along our southern border and wide open borders, while cartels allow little girls to die and be France and sold into the sex trafficking trade. These liberal white elitists are trying to screw over the American people who are working hard trying to follow the American dream. I had a guy who stopped me at a gas station here in Texas. He's been here for 25 years in Venezuela. And he said, thank you for standing up and fighting for the people who are trying to achieve the American dream. Stop allowing them to do to this country what they did to Venezuela. What Hugo Chavez did to Venezuela. That's what they're saying.
That's exactly what they're saying. That's all of their rhetoric regarding equity and their obsession with anything that's not perfectly equal. This is right out of the Marxist playbook. This is exactly how you flip a country. You tell a country that's thriving that they're awful, and then you work to destroy it. He once again manipulating the numbers to explain how he's going to pay for this, by the way, as well. Right. Biden is calling himself a deficit reducer simply because he's not spending as much as the explosive amounts that we spent during COVID, which is ridiculous comparing to a time when Fauci froze the economy and we had to spend trillions of dollars for people to sit at home. Now we're not spending that much, and they call themselves deficit reducers. Take a listen to this.
How do we pay for it? We pay for it by what we've done. Last year, we cut the deficit by more than $350 billion. This year, we're on track to cut it by more than $1.7 trillion by the end of this fiscal year. The single largest deficit reduction in a single year in the history of America.
I mean, it's such a con artist, the way he talks about it. We're still spending far more than we bring in on an annual basis. We're still a $100,000 family spending $200,000 a year is what we are. This just adds to the bill, and then they try to pretend like they're cutting the debt.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. I can't even listen to that incompetent buffoon talk. And what he's doing is lying to the American people, just like Mayorkas lied to me in the committee about a secure border, just like Garland isn't lying about what they're doing with the FBI targeting terrorists. It is
lie after lie after lie. And this is another example. They're spending $1 trillion more than we're taking in every year on the back of $5 trillion dumped into the economy, driving up inflation because Anthony Fauci wanted to be on the cover of the magazine and decided to screw America by putting forward this whole lockdown theory that screwed up our country, screwed up our kids. And now this guy wants to lie about it. You want to pay for these student loans, which we shouldn't even do in the first place? Go tax those big liberal Ivy League endowments. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to take this money out of the hides of hardworking Americans in the form of either direct payments or by borrowing more money, screwing over the future kids and grandkids of this country. It's time for that to stop. The Republicans better grow a spine and fight this as if the same thing they're doing us, they're shooting at us, and we're showing up with T-shirts. Let's go take this head on.
Absolutely. Looking ahead to the midterms real quick, if Republicans take back the House, you're prepared to launch an assault over vaccine mandates. Tell us about this.
Yeah, well, look, this is something that I was just at Parris Island in South Carolina. I've been talking to military leaders in the country. It's harming our recruiting to our military and on top of the entire woke nonsense going on at DoD. So we need to stop the vaccine mandates. They're completely unnecessarily. I believe they're unconstitutional, wrong, and unlawful. We should end them. We should not be funding any of the bureaucracy, the authoritarian bureaucracy, the same authoritarians that are going to fund IRS agents to go after youth. The same authoritarians that are funding the FBI to go after parents and going to school boards and going after a former president. The same authoritarians that are funding a DHS to not secure the border and to go after Border Patrol. Those people who are saying you got to stick a needle in your arm while we, lift up Anthony Fauci as some sort of, godly figure, which is completely absurd. We Republicans need to have hearings to expose it. We need to fire people, heads need to roll, and we need to defund these bureaucratic authoritarian agencies that are sticking to the American people every single day. If we don't do that, then Republicans should be kicked out. But we should get in there and do our job.
Fighting hard. Congressman Chip Boyd, sir, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Take care. God bless.
Rob Schmidt tonight. Great story out of Florida last night. Parents fed up with critical race theory and wokeness elected Republicans to school board seats across the state. They crushed a lot of Democrats last night. 25 out of the 30 candidates endorsed by Ron DeSantis and conservative groups won. 25 out of 30, that ain't bad. In Sarasota County, the school board flipped from 3-2 liberal majority to a 4-1 conservative. That's a flip. In Duval County, home of Jacksonville, Republicans flipped the school board to majority registered Republicans 4-3. They also flipped Martin and Clay counties as well. The biggest victory of all, Miami-Dade County, the crown jewel. Republicans won 2 seats, and they now control one of the biggest school districts of the country with over 330,000 students inside of it. It's fantastic. You see the guy on the left in that picture? Joining me now is one of the Miami-Dade school board candidates who won last night, Roberto Alonso. And, sir, thank you for coming on tonight, and congratulations. I know it was probably a tough fight to get there. Walk me through the victory, and what was the biggest issue that parents had in Miami-Dade County that led to this?
Bob, thanks for having me on the show. It was a tough one. It was a grueling one. We knocked on doors throughout all of South Florida for the last couple of months, listening to the parents of our district. Parents were fed up. What they were seeing was not what they wanted. As you said earlier, it was Marxism inside of our schools. They wanted an end to the woke, and they wanted time for our schools to get back to basics. Let's teach the basic material, math, English, history, not all this nonsense that's going on.
All right, well, I lived in Miami-Dade County for almost 4 years. You were the son of Cuban refugees. Today's Democrat Party, as we all know, is singularly focused on pointing out all these inequities in our society, convincing Americans that this country is inherently unjust and needs to be rebuilt. And what you realize, and a lot of people don't, is that this is all just a political tactic. This is a Marxist tactic. This is how you tear down a functioning good society.
Rob, we've seen this happen in past history. As you said, my 2 parents came to this country, as children. They came on Peter Pan flights from Cuba, where their parents had to put them on planes as orphans to come to this great country that provided them with the opportunity to a good education, a free education, where you were not being indoctrinated. You were actually being educated on true material. So I know what the pains are, and I was not going to let that happen here in our district.
I love that. Can we save public schools in this country? I sometimes I see this story, and this is a wonderful story, but the radical left has got a very solid grip on education, K-12 and all the way through college.
Rob, it used to be something that was falling in our and slowly they've infiltrated all of our K-12 schools. But I have hope. I have a lot of hope. I've spoken to a lot of teachers here in Miami-Dade County that do not stand with the union. They know that the union really does not care about the children nor the teachers. goal is to support their Marxist agenda and to stand with the left.
That's right. You're exactly right about that. Boy, did those unions pull a number on us during COVID, and we're starting to really expose what they're all about. And that's such an important part of it, is getting people to figure out what this is so they can see it, expose it all. Roberto Alonso, school board, Miami-Dade County, we thank you so much for coming on tonight. What a great story. Good job. Good job. All right, footage of Paul Pelosi's DUI was released last night, and it's as good as we told you it would be. The dash cam video was shot by California Highway Patrol. It shows Pelosi had a big night before he crashed his Porsche into his Jeep and injured the driver. Take a listen to this. I just want to go home. You know, I'm Nancy's husband. That's why we're so rich. You know, because I know everything's going to happen 2 weeks before that. You know, we're stagnating. Throughout the video, you can see Paul Pelosi clinging onto his car, just trying to keep balance. He's grabbing the car. Oh, he's going to grab the car. The cop's even saying, hey, you know, that's kind of, you know, ruining the point here. The point is to see if you can stand up on your own. He's staring into space, slurring his speech. The officer on scene said he couldn't answer some pretty basic questions. Paul Pelosi had a night, and naturally he's probably drinking some damn good wine that you and I can't afford. Pelosi pleaded guilty. He won't face any jail time like you or I would. He was sentenced to 3 years probation. Part of Pelosi's probation includes 8 hours of court work. I'm sure there's a bigger way to squeeze a lot of that. A 3-month drinking and driving course, which he'll probably do sitting on his couch, ignoring his computer. And he'll have an ignition interlock device. And he still has to go get a new Porsche, which is unfortunate. All right, coming up, Ron DeSantis' challenger, Charlie Crist, who clinched his party's nomination last night, pretty much handed the Florida governor a victory with some dumb words. Political chameleon Charlie Crist with the bonehead statement of the day, I don't want your vote. The former Republican who clinched the Democrat Party nomination in Florida's gubernatorial election last night as a unifier, says DeSantis supporters are hateful and he doesn't want anything to do with it. If you like Ron DeSantis, which is like the vast majority of Florida right now, just keep your vote down. Just yesterday he tweeted out, DeSantis fights to divide, I fight to unite. Big-time unifier here. In a state, by the way, that's flourishing, thriving, unlike most of these states. Crist, who hasn't won statewide office since 2006, is known for flip-flopping on a number of issues throughout his political career. He's very pro-life. I think he was fiercely opposed to Barack Obama, but today he gushed.
Phenomenal. Gas prices are down. Inflation is trending down. He's a great man. He's a great president. I can't wait for him to get down here. I need his help. I want his help. And he's the best I've ever met. I know this man. He offered me his lunch when he was campaigning for me.
This has got to be some kind of game, right? This is a con job. This is like political suicide. Somebody basically, right? Biden is the best he's ever seen. You're going to say that in Florida and try to win? You're going to tell DeSantis supporters not to vote for you because they're racist and terrible people? Republican strategist Aaron Perini and Washington Times online opinion editor Cheryl Chumley join me now. Ladies, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Aaron, I'm going to start with you. Chris also went, he was on CNN this morning, as you just saw. Let's take a listen to a little bit more.
Terror powers my state. Children. Attacking women in their right to choose, disrespecting women, attacking African-American voters, making it more difficult for them to vote, not having drop boxes in minority communities throughout the state of Florida. It's like he wakes up every morning about the new group he wants to vote for.
Aaron, your thoughts on this?
I mean, kudos to Charlie Crist for giving a true masterclass in how not to pivot to a general election and to alienate half of the voters on day one of your general election campaign. You're seeing Ron DeSantis, who has large approvals in the state. So what you're saying is of those people, you don't want your vote. So you're already setting yourself up to lose. If you don't want the people who voted for DeSantis and DeSantis last time, again, you're setting yourself up for losing because those are the people you want to vote for you. And him fawning over Joe Biden in a state like Florida, where you saw Ron DeSantis' political machine really flex its arm, where 25 of his 30 endorsed school board candidates won, that's your best message here, is to hug Joe Biden in and then try to vilify DeSantis people. It truly is the most ignorant thing I've seen in politics, and that's speaking to a lot because I've been in this game for a little bit.
I know, right? Yeah, we see a lot of stupid stuff. Cheryl, your thoughts? I mean, it seems like it was a rough first day in the general.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly. Look, it seems like he gets the definition of unifying from Joe Biden, because if you remember, Joe Biden promised to unify the country, and look where we're at. And now we have Charlie Crist promising to unify the state. Well, he's dissing half the state. And if he seriously thinks that he is going to win support from independents and from other on-the-fence voters in Florida by coming out battling against Ron DeSantis supporters, and I think he needs to tone down his rhetoric a bit. This is a guy who represents the worst of politics. He started out as Republican. He ran for the Senate. He didn't get GOP funding against Marco Rubio, so he switched to run as an independent. And then later he switched to become a Democrat, not just any old Democrat, but he came out and endorsed Barack Obama, and then ran for governor as a Democrat. And so here's a guy who would do anything and say anything to get into office. And as his remarks show, he hasn't changed.
Yeah, he's a grifter. Republican, independent, Democrat. I mean, how do you do that? And who knows what he really is? Another closely watched race, ladies, in New York. Democrat Pat Ryan winning a special election for the open seat in District 19. It was a swing district. Trump won it. Then Biden won it. And it was a real nail-biter. Ryan leading Republican Mark Molinaro by 51 to 49 as it came to a close. Due to redistricting, Ryan will fill the District 19 seat formerly held by Democrat Antonio Delgado. Both Molinaro and Ryan are also on primary ballots for the general election as well. But talking about this election from last night, I think a lot of Republicans felt that this was one that they could steal, Aaron. Is there something to worry about?
Well, Republicans should be looking at this race, but they should also look at a couple of things key to this race. One, you're seeing that the abortion messaging that Pat Ryan used is really enthusing some Democrats. But then again, in New York, if you look at New York 12, where Carolyn Maloney really ran on a pro-abortion, women's rights, equal rights type of platform, she lost. So I think Democrat voters might be enthused, but general voters might be confused, because even in New York 12, where it's very deeply blue, they rejected that messaging. So I think the American people are telling us one thing concretely. They want a reason to vote against the Democrats. In New York, they didn't have what they thought was a good enough reason. So Republicans need to start messaging in a way that says, I understand the problems you're facing, because it's still the economy that's the top in all of the polling as issues, and I know how to solve it. They have yet to get that message out there, so you do see them losing these kind of special elections when we should be ramping up for November.
Right. Cheryl, Dave Wasserman tweeted out lots of focus on Democrats being more engaged, energetic post the Dobbs decision, which is undeniably true, but he thinks that the GOP Trump base appears less engaged than it was last November. That is concerning. Now, obviously, this is just one man's opinion, but he's deep into this stuff. And he gets a lot of things right. What do you think of that statement that the Trump GOP is less engaged?
Yeah, I don't see it that way at all, and particularly in the days since the raid from the FBI on Donald Trump, close home and a right-hand through Melania's clothes closet. I think Americans that were independent, or maybe Americans who did not want Trump to run again, don't so much care who the Republican pick is this time. They just want to get out and put a stop to the Democrat overreach.
Okay, Cheryl and Aaron, thank you both so much for your time. All right, a 13-year-old girl.
I can't. My toes.
Turns out, it is hard walking your mind in someone else's shoes.
And it turns out that General is a quality insurance company that's been saving people money for nearly 60 years. I gotta go. For a great low rate and nearly 60 years of quality coverage, go with the General.
Third woman has been arrested for her part in the beating death of a beloved New York City child, charged with brutal gang assault and robbery. The video is horrific.
freedom is in the very best tradition of America. No history of the United States, no recounting of the unending struggle to live up to our founding promises would be complete without recognition of the peaceful movements that have pushed this nation forward. From the abolitionists, to the suffragettes, to the countless brave and heroic souls who marched in support of the civil rights movement. Peaceable assemblies have moved mountains in this country. And they still can. When America saw the horrifying video of a police officer killing George Floyd, a brutal killing evoked for many the nation's long history of racial discrimination and injustice. Americans rightly
I think it is harmful for the trans athletes to be told, like, if they identify as male, that they are not.
Yeah.
And so I see that.
You just said male.
Uh-huh.
That's sex. That's not gender.
Oh, sorry. Whatever is the gender.
No, you can't keep it straight, can you?
I mean, I will.
Because it's silly. It's a little silly. It's time for another installment of Change My Mind, the series where we rationalize our positions on topics. Now, today's subject is a hot one in the news lately: biological males in women's sports.
A Victorian woman who won a world championship in master cycling has been hit with a wave of backlash because she is transgender.
New Zealand has chosen the first transgender athlete to compete at its Olympic Games. It's also reignited a debate with critics who say it's unfair.
Transgender swimmer Leah Thomas breaking barriers and records. Sports Illustrated calls the college senior the most controversial athlete in America.
The beauty of Change My Mind is that almost invariably, productive dialogue takes place, and people generally leave feeling better than they came, which is exactly what happened here. But not everyone from the tolerant activist left was so happy about, conversation. What's the message of radical transliberation now? What does it mean?
I'm not here to talk to you, Steven.
No? No one? Radical transliberation now? Look! I'm slightly chocolatey! This one's still a mystery to me. We're still trying to identify the gender. Is it male? Female, Z-male, trigender. Either way, I was greatly inconvenienced. If you figure it out, comment below. The point is, some people just don't know how to use their words. Unlike this person, Isaac, with whom I had a conversation that was a little more productive. Isaac, Steven, nice to meet you. So, I know you said you've watched the show?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know how familiar you are kind of with this, but the idea is that we, sit down with people, hopefully where it's a rational discussion on what are sort of controversial topics. And often people have rational discussions on topics that are, okay, it's easy to have a rational discussion, or it's easy to rationalize your position. The second it gets into something that may be emotionally charged, we throw it out the window. So that's what it is in the bottom line. Today's topic, I do not believe that biological males should be allowed to compete in women's sports.
I don't do the voice message thing.
To some degree.
Yes.
Sorry.
Feel free to make your case and change my mind.
Okay. I guess my first point of contention would be with the wording of the statement.
Okay.
Biological males should not compete. I'm curious as to why it would be biological males and not trans women should not compete, because I feel like there is a distinction there, even if it is, maybe an arbitrary one in your case.
Well, how is it not arbitrary?
How is it not? Oh, you mean the distinction between trans? Yeah.
So when you say that, for example, I could use either term interchangeably.
Yeah.
Biological males is something that everyone would understand.
Yeah.
So why is it so important to you that terminology be changed?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the times people use like biology as a sort of like constant. You know, obviously, I'm sure you believe, maybe I'm wrong, that like biology it's a binary and that there's male and female, and that it's just like that. Is that correct? And that you could be one or the other, and that there's no.
As a general, there are obviously radical exceptions to
Okay,
like
sure.
intersex people and people.
And peaceably assembled to demand justice for every American, regardless of skin color. But what began as legitimate protests against a vile act of abuse, sadly, were soon hijacked by early June. Rioters had injured more than 700 law enforcement officers across the country and had murdered David Dorn, a retired officer who served St. Louis with honor for many years. They also damaged or destroyed countless buildings and businesses. In Minneapolis alone, rioters burned affordable housing and damaged over 400 businesses, many of them owned by African Americans, at a cost of well over $500 million in damages. In Philadelphia, police cars were set ablaze. In Seattle, rioters who damaged hundreds of buildings were granted and allowed to set up a so-called autonomous zone by local officials, who all too predictably resulted in more crime, including 4 shootings that cost 2 young people their lives. The fact is, the people who took the streets because their hearts cried out for justice have become overshadowed by rioters and looters and those who cynically exploit the protest for their own evil ends. And those rioters aren't concerned about racial justice. Indeed, they're willing to make a mockery of the peaceful protest to advance their violent objectives. Their actions are profoundly racist, the rioters, as they destroy minority communities, minority businesses, and minority lives across this country. This shouldn't be complicated. Peaceful protests must be protected. Riots must be stopped. No one has a right to assault another person, to firebomb a building, to throw a Molotov cocktail into a police car. That's not exercising a constitutional right. That is terrorizing your fellow citizens. More and more we're seeing signs that a significant portion of this violence, of this rioting, is not random, it's not spontaneous. Rather, it is coordinated and inspired by leftist, anarchist groups like Antifa, that will, without shame, exploit a national tragedy to attack American buildings, American homes, American lives.
Doctors can't believe how fast their ugly yellow toenail fungus disappeared after doing this simple 3-minute wet rinse ritual before bed every night. Thousands of people suffering with toenail fungus, some for over 10 years, started doing this simple ritual at home, and their toenails finally started to clear up. International leading fungal expert and doctor Kimberly Langdon has discovered this natural way to reclaim the healthy pink toenails you were born with. Did you know toenail fungus has absolutely nothing to do with your toes?
This is happening in my home state, in Austin and Dallas. It's happening across the country, whether in Minneapolis, Nevada City, Pittsburgh, or Toledo, to name a few. Tragically, nowhere more so than in Portland, Oregon. In Portland, Antifa and other radicals have thrown metal pipes at DHS officers and used commercial-grade lasers to try to blind them. Haven't heard of it. They launched mortar-style attacks with commercial-grade fireworks. They firebombed a federal courthouse. This is not peaceful protest. This violence speaks for itself. But for good measure and graffiti on the county courthouse, they wrote, "Until the police and ICE are abolished, we will burn this city down piece by piece." They are telling us what their demands are. To shut down and abolish the police. This violence should be universally. All 100 senators ought to come together and say, don't murder your fellow citizens, don't attack police officers, protect each other's rights. Instead of seeing leaders united, we're seeing too many local officials, mayors, and governors, who've made a cynical decision that it's in their partisan interest to turn a blind eye to this violence. To turn a blind eye to the law enforcement officers being attacked on a nightly basis. And even worse than that, to demonize the police officers. To throw out terms like stormtrooper and Gestapo. To describe federal law enforcement officers doing their jobs. It's for that reason that I've introduced legislation called the Reclaim Act. The Reclaim Act provides that if you as an American, if you are injured, if your property is damaged, if your home is burned to the ground, if your business is looted and destroyed during a riot, as a result of a decision of political leaders to deny you police protection, that you have a federal cause of action to sue the municipality or the city that has denied you police protection and has willfully looked the other way while your life was endangered, while your home or business was burned to the ground. Denying fair protection of law enforcement is a civil rights violation for any American who is denied. Just days after George Floyd was killed, Representative John Lewis, the nation just born, he said, quote, "Rioting, looting, burning, organize, demonstrate, sit in, stand up, vote." Representative Lewis is exactly right. We all have a right to free speech, and we should protect that right vigorously. But we should also be united in condemning political violence and condemning domestic terrorism, and understand just what is happening on the ground, what the heroic men and women of law enforcement are facing right now. It's helpful to see directly what's occurring. There's video that should display some.
condoning violence against anyone, by anyone. This hearing is titled, quote, "The Right of the People Peaceably to Assemble, Protecting Speech by Stopping Anarchist Violence," end quote. But the hearing we should be having is one called "The Right of the People Peaceably to Assemble Without Being Beaten Up by Unidentifiable Federal Agents." That would address an actual problem lawful protesters are facing and the rest of us are seeing in this country. The murder of George Floyd has led to protests across the country and indeed around the world. In response, the federal government has used violence and excessive force to break up these protests. We saw this in two well-known examples, in Lafayette Square in D.C. and in Portland, Oregon. On June 3rd, peacefully protesting around the White House, calling for an end to racial injustice and suddenly, federal agents, under the direction of Attorney General Barr, used chemical gas, batons, rubber bullets, riot shields, and flashbang grenades to forcibly disperse the protesters and clear the area. Clearly, this was done so President Trump could get a photo op in front of St. John's Church. There was no anarchist violence in Lafayette Square. In fact, the only ones using force were federal law enforcement agents. Portland is another clear example where federal agents use excessive and indiscriminate force to break up people gathered to peacefully protest. On July 4th, unidentified federal agents arrived in Portland, outfitted as if for war, wearing camouflage and heavy gear. To justify this unnecessary deployment of federal officers, President Trump and his administration have repeatedly portrayed Portland protesters as violent anarchists and members of that. But in the past 4 weeks, what we have actually seen are federal agents beating up on nonviolent protesters, tear gassing them, and shooting them with rubber bullets and other so-called death-deterrent munitions. We saw federal agents shoot a 26-year-old nonviolent protester in the face with one of these death-deterrent munitions. And as you can see in the photo here, Donovan Labella suffered skull fractures. He was in ICU, required surgery. We saw federal officers beat a 53-year-old Navy veteran, approach them, why they were not honoring their oaths to the Constitution. When Christopher Davis refused to react when federal agents beat him and broke his bones, they pepper sprayed them in the face. We saw federal officers tear gas moms, dads, and veterans who stood as a wall to protect peaceful protesters. We also saw unidentified federal forces grab peaceful protesters off the street and force them into unmarked vans. Described having his hat pulled over his face. I am not alone in my deep concern over the federal agents' use of force and violence against protesters in Oregon. The Attorney General of Oregon has sued the federal government to stop federal agents from using the kind of, in quote, secret police tactics, where they take people off the street and force them into unmarked vans. State and local officials in Oregon have demanded that federal forces leave Portland because they have brought arms. And the inspectors general of the Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice have decided that the federal officers' use of force against protesters in Portland were concerning enough to open an investigation. The Justice Department's Inspector General has also concluded that the federal officers' use of force against peaceful protesters near Lafayette Square was concerning enough to include in its investigation. Despite these facts, we are having a hearing on protecting peaceful protesters from anarchist violence. What we've seen in Portland, peaceful protesters in need of protection from federal officers. Let's be clear, once again, no one but by focusing only on this approach is furthering President Trump's efforts to distract us from the underlying issues that millions of people while anti-fascists have killed no one until politically motivated. The largest movement ever, when millions of people have marched peacefully in the streets following the murder of two men. This subcommittee peacefully assembled. We should be focused on preventing federal officers from leaving us Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would like to show a video that highlights the excessive use of federal
Releasing all the tension out of the neck, out of the shoulders. Hello. Gonna hug your right hand around that left leg and look forward.
Bye, guys. Woo! Good stretching. My name is Jesse Ashlock, and I'm the U.S. editor of Condé Nast Traveler. I'm lucky enough to get to travel to some of the best places in the world for a living. My assignment this time is to explore Baha Mar, the game-changing resort in the Bahamas. This is a place that promises to have something for everyone, no matter who you are or who you're traveling with. They call it the luxury of choice, and I'm here to put that concept to the test. Come along and check it all out.
protester was detained at this location nearby.
What are you doing?
Federal officers didn't identify themselves. The patches on the right and the left sides of their uniforms match those used by members of Delta, a tactical unit from Customs and Border Protection. They drove the protester away in an unmarked car. DHS says federal officers have made 43 arrests since July 4th.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. Note at the end of that video, as narrated, it says, describes law enforcement officers as unidentified, while the video shows them with the words police in bright yellow all caps across their chest. So that is a curious way to describe a law enforcement officer as unidentified. also note that the ranking member said nobody is condoning the violence and rioting, and yet nowhere in the opening remarks was even one word condemning the assaults, condemning the 277 injuries that federal law enforcement officers have suffered at the hands of those rioters. Not a word. Not a word was said about the murder of federal law enforcement officer Patrick Underwood. Not a word was said about the murder of retired St. Louis police officer David Dorn, both of whom are African Americans, and both of whom were murdered. And we're told we don't condone this. We simply won't say a negative word about this terrorist. The senators from Oregon have both asked to come before this committee, given what's transpiring, appropriate courtesy to extend them. So we will now recognize both senators from Oregon, Senator Wyden and Senator Murphy, both of whom have asked to address the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we can.
Chairman, time is short, so I will get right to the question of protecting free speech. First, as a senator from Oregon and a Portlander, I want to begin by asking this afternoon who Americans believe is the real threat to our constitutional rights. Is it the Oregonians who gathered in my hometown in overwhelmingly peaceful protests for racial justice since the murder of George Floyd? Or is it the heavily armed secret police who snatched Portlanders off the street into unmarked vans and interrogated them without justification or charges? Is it the wall of moms or racist women like my friend Sharon Myron, an emergency room physician and a county commissioner who puts themselves in harm's way to protect their neighbors? Or is it the unidentifiable federal paramilitary forces without provocation, batons and tear gas of moms and their fellow protesters? Is it the peacefully gathered Portlanders who raised their hands in the air and sang the words, "Hands up, please don't shoot," to the tune of a lullaby? Or is it a duplicitous president who calls Oregonians professional anarchists, professional agitators, people who hate our country, and calls my hometown a beehive of terrorists? This argument that Americans exercising a right to peaceful protest are anarchists, terrorists, and agitators is bad, safe nonsense. Violent conflict in Portland began before Donald Trump got involved. Portlanders are standing up for justice. I've seen Black Lives Matter activists in Portland and other cities trying mightily to prevent acts of vandalism because, as they point out eloquently, it certainly distracts from their calls for justice and equality. Mr. Chairman, the Associated Press did an analysis of 200 Portland arrests, and they found that most who were charged for nonviolent acts did not fit the depiction of an anarchist. They did their analysis, Mr. Chairman, on the basis of public records, court documents. I would ask unanimous consent that we could put the Associated Press analysis into the record.
Without objection.
Well, Mr. Chairman, why make these baseless conspiratorial accusations and send in secret police? Donald Trump sent in the secret police to create images of chaos for political gain, to air and campaign ads and provide a basis for bad faith discussion. Fortunately, in the days since federal forces backed off, chaos has largely stopped in Portland. But the president is still getting the scenes of violence for the ads that he wanted, and he threatens further escalation in Portland and elsewhere. Now, this nonsense about leftist anarchy also papers over the murders and vandalism committed by far-right domestic terrorists. Those murders
Duct tape. It's the #1 restraint used by bad guys globally, and that is why you need to know how to escape from it. So let's talk about duct tape for a second. It's cheap, it's readily available all over the globe, and let's face it, it's the easiest thing to use to restrain someone if you're into that kind of thing. So here are some techniques that you can use if you find yourself in a sticky situation. The easiest is simply carry a razor blade with you. My favorite place to hide it is in the sole of your shoes. You just have to remember that you've got to be able to get to your shoe whether your hands are bound in front of you or behind you. You can also use your waistline so that no matter whether your hands are bound in front or in back, you can still get to your flanks. Heck, even these days, you've got clothing manufacturers that actually have concealed pockets just for this reason. If you don't have a razor blade, that's okay. You can use other techniques to escape. Simply rubbing that tape back and forth on a corner or a rough surface will slowly break it and you can escape. The third is to use your body as a wedge. This technique requires practice. With your hands bound in front of you, you're going to launch your elbows past your rib cage using your body as a wedge, and it's going to shear the tape right in half. If you do it right, it'll look like the tape had been cut with a pair of scissors. If your feet are bound and you can't get to them with your hands and undo the tape, then you can stand up and squat as quickly as possible to the ground. And that will also act as a wedge and force the tape to shear. If you find yourself restrained and you don't have the tools or maybe you don't have the techniques, there's always something in the environment that you can leverage. At the end of the day, when you find yourself restrained, remain calm, use common sense, and escape as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. Senator Merkley.
Chairman Cruz and Ranking Member Hirono, thank you for convening this hearing on the critical need to protect peaceful assembly in America. We've heard conflicting stories about Portland. Scenes taken from early on after George Floyd was murdered, protesters in a very angry state, and there was some substantial destruction. But weeks later, that had disappeared, down to a small number of late-night folks. And that's when this conversation starts to make a transition to what the federal forces have done. Here's what the scene looked like in Portland when the federal troops were arriving. Thousands of people peacefully protesting, holding flowers, dancing, chanting, arguing that we need to have a reform in America so that there is equal public safety for all, equal justice for all. A wall of mobs was going to protect peaceful protesters from the federal forces behind them. Then at about 11 p.m., the federal forces would storm out of the federal building and attack the peaceful demonstration. These forces, wearing camouflage, were armed with military-grade tear gas, flashbang grenades, impact munitions, pepper spray, batons, and they used them all. Pictures of 3 officers attack a 53-year-old Navy veteran, Chris Davis, shooting him with batons while third pepper sprays his face while he stands with his hands at his side. He just wanted to talk to Trump's officers about why they were arresting protesters without probable cause. Or picture this. A young man named Donovan Labella stands facing the troops holding a radio over his head. An officer standing across the street shoots him in the center of his forehead, sending him to the hospital in critical condition with a fractured skull. Picture this. Thousands of ordinary Portlanders from every corner of the city, every walk of life, are assaulted. A disturbing number of them end up in the hospital with serious injuries from the federal troops, and thousands are dealing with the after effects of military-grade tear gas. After attacking the crowd, Trump's forces swept through the streets, grabbed protesters, threw them into unmarked vans with no specific charge or probable cause. The forces have no agency marking. If they do, it's hidden. They have no unique identifiers. There's no way to hold anyone accountable for outrageous acts against peaceful protesters. These features, officers with no identity attacking protesters. We can summon to inmarch bands are the features of secret police tactics from around the world. I never thought an American president would bring such tactics to the streets of America, but Trump has. So we should pass the No Secret Police in America Act to end it if we want to protect peaceful assembly in the United States of America. These tactics, Mr. Chairman, were not about arresting anarchists. Chris David, Donovan Labella, and thousands of peaceful protesters were not anarchists. They are citizens who love their Constitution and believe that in our We the People Republic, we have a responsibility to call for justice. And call they have.
Those are the
day after
Democrats
day,
doing that
week
shit.
after week. These Americans inspire me, and they should inspire you. Have there been incidents of violence and destruction by a few? Yes. And I don't condone vandalism, and I condemn anyone threatening harm to anyone else. But Trump's forces did not arrest the violent few. They attacked the peaceful many. There is a world of difference in that. I encourage you to listen to first-hand witnesses to the violent tactics of Trump's forces. I read a lot of them on the floor, but here's another one. Ellen Urbani, a former Peace Corps volunteer, observes, so I'm standing there the whole time, and I'm really just trying to pay attention and thinking, I haven't heard anything. They haven't told us we have to clear the street. They haven't declared it a riot. There was nothing. Then we were gassed. No one gave any warnings. After the gas came pepper bullets, and she says, and you could hear the rat-a-tat-a-tat. And honestly, my first thought was, what happened to my helmet? I thought I had a helmet on. It just hurt so badly, even through the helmet, to get shot in the head. And then came the rubber bullets. They shot and broke my left foot, but I stayed up. I mean, the pain was awful. My toes, they split the bones in my face and toes. And then came more tear gas. And she says, and the girl on my left, the tear gas canister was shot directly into her head. All of us here, sworn to defend the Constitution, should condemn these secret police paramilitary-style attacks on citizens. It's not acceptable anywhere in the world. It's an unbelievable offense against civil rights here on the streets of our democratic republic. President Trump first tried this strategy out in D.C., deploying unmarked forces in some locations by attacking peaceful protesters across the White House. Next, he brought the strategy to Portland. Then he bragged about plans to use the same tactics against cities with Democratic mayors: Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York City, Detroit, Chicago, and Oakland. Simultaneously, he launched a presidential campaign ad campaign about being a strong law and order president. President Trump is confused. Using secret police tactics against peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters doesn't make him a defender of law and order. It makes him a violent suppressor. After national coverage of these tactics, President Trump retreated, withdrawing his federal agents from Portland. The protests since have been peaceful celebrations focused on the message of the BLM movement. I went and saw it myself this past weekend. I spoke at a rally hosted by the local chapter of the NAACP. I walked around talking to folks who have been there day after day, week after week. These men and women want our nation to reckon with the systemic racism that remains at the heart of so many of our institutions, and which has shaped life in this country for more than 4 centuries. Closing with this quote. The great Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall once said, I wish I could say that racism and prejudice were only distant memories. We must dissent from the indifference. We must dissent from the apathy. We must dissent from the fear, the hatred, and the mistrust. We must dissent because America can do better. Colleagues, America can do better. America must do better.
Okay, we'll now call forward our first panel. Our first panel of 2 government witnesses. The first is Ms. Erin Neely Cox from my home state of Texas. The second is Mr. Ken Cuccinelli from the Department of Homeland Security. Ms. Cox currently serves as the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Texas and is the co-head of the Department of Justice's Task Force on Violent Anti-Government Extremists. Immediately prior to her appointment as U.S. Attorney, Ms. Cox was a senior advisor at McKinsey & Company in the cybersecurity and risk practice. Before that, she spent nearly a decade as an assistant U.S. Attorney in the office she now leads, and served as the Chief of Staff and Senior Counsel in the Office of Legal Policy in the U.S. Department of Justice. Ms. Cox began her legal career with clerkships for Judge Henry A. Politz of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit and for Judge H. Barefoot Sanders of the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas. She earned her J.D. from the Dedman School of Law at Southern Methodist University and her Bachelor's of Business Administration from the University of Texas at Austin. Our second witness is Mr. Ken Cuccinelli, who is the senior official performing the duties of the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. In that role, he oversees many of the department's functions that are vital to its mission of safeguarding the American people and our homeland. Before assuming his current position, Mr. Cuccinelli served in the Virginia State Senate from 2002 to 2010, and from 2010 to 2014, he served as the Attorney General of Virginia. Before serving as Mr. Cuccinelli worked in private legal practice. Mr. Cuccinelli MA in International Commerce and Policy from George Mason University and a Bachelor of Science from the University of Virginia. I would ask each of the witnesses to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You may be seated, and Ms. Cox will start with you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Corona, and members of the Senate, United States Attorney for the Northern District of Texas, and Chair of the Attorney General's Department. Thank you for inviting me here today to discuss the Justice Department's effort to counter violent anti-government extremism. For me, it's a topic that hits close to home. A little over a year ago, in June, a gunman clad in military gear and carrying an AR-15 style rifle opened fire on the federal courthouse in Dallas, which houses not only the federal judiciary, but also my office, the U.S. Attorney Office, and many other offices. The setting violence frequently morning, just as we were arriving for work that day. Several of my prosecutors and others were caught in the midst of the attack. They resorted to hiding behind cars in the parking lot, and one was pushed into a doorway by an FPS officer just as the bullets whizzed past me heard. Our office will be forever grateful to the FPS officers who engaged the shooter, ending the attack before innocent lives were lost. To this day, we remain rattled by the gunman's anti-government motives. He chose his location for a reason. The courthouse is one of the essential nodes within the body politic. It's where laws are upheld, where justice is meted out. To target a courthouse and those who work there is to target the core of our lawful society. And Dallas is no stranger to assault on the rule of law. 3 years prior, just blocks from the federal courthouse, a gunman targeting law enforcement ambushed police during the Black Lives Matter protest. 5 officers were killed. 11 others were injured, including 9 officers. This was the deadliest single incident for law enforcement in the United States since 9/11. That day in July 2016 was certainly something etched in our memory. Just as the bullet holes still etched in the federal courthouse last year remind us daily, anti-government fanaticism did not emerge with the 2020 protest. But as our citizens have organized lawful demonstrations across the country following the tragic events in Minneapolis, anarchists continue to exploit this lawful First Amendment activity as a shield for their violent behavior. Somehow, the notion of committing violence in the name of anti-government dogma, be it Antifa, Blue, or any of the other espoused ideologies, has been gaining traction at an alarming rate. Unlike the lawful protesters whose demonstrations they undermine, these anti-government extremists aim to tear down the rule of law in America, not improve it. In fact, the majority of violence here are drowning out the voices of the protesters that this country wants to keep your brain healthy. We've recently seen anti-government violence making headlines all across the nation. Just a few examples. In Seattle, during an anarchist occupation of the Capitol Hill area, allegedly set fire to a police station. Thankfully, protesters rushed in to help extinguish the blaze. In Portland, a would-be anarchist outside the federal courthouse allegedly attacked the deputy U.S. Marshal with a large hammer, landing blows on the officer's neck and shouting expletives as other deputies had to hold them off. On the courthouse barricade were scribbled the letters ACAB, an acronym for All Cops Are Bastards. In Oakland, a violent extremist allegedly used a peaceful protest as a cover to murder an FPS officer stationed at the federal courthouse, firing directly at the officer and his partner before taking off. In response to this type of violence, Attorney General Barr directed U.S. Attorney Craig Marcado for the District of New Jersey and me to lead a task force to combat violent, anti-government extremism. Working in close collaboration with the FBI, the task force aims to investigate and prosecute extremists of all flavors. We'll follow where the evidence leads us, investigating any person or group who plans to commit or commits violence in the name of anarchist ideology. Our goal is to focus on cases where violent extremists commit federal crimes and seek ways to disrupt and prevent these criminal acts before they harm Americans. Of course, let me be clear with this final point. Adhering to repugnant ideology is not a crime, nor is expressing those beliefs. The right to freedom of speech is enshrined in our First Amendment, but committing violence or inciting violence in order to further that dogma is a criminal act and is one that we should all take very seriously. Extremist violence and dangerous actions as important, it also interferes with citizens' right to be treated in a civil or statement.
Thank you, Ms. Cox. Mr. Kuchinelli.
Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Bruno, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the Department of Homeland Security's role in protecting against continued assaults by criminals and violent extremists in the city of Portland, and more specifically the federal courthouse and the federal law enforcement officers. For more than 2 months now, federal property and federal law enforcement officers in Portland have been under assault. In July, it occurred every single night until the end of the month. Violent extremists in Portland have perverted the peaceful protests in the aftermath of George Floyd's tragic death. As we begin, it's important to be crystal clear about this. Rioters are not protesters, and protesters are not rioters. To confuse the two does a grave disservice to the critical place for peaceful protest in our country. Let me be clear. The department fully supports the rights of peaceful protesters. We will never abandon our mission to safeguard the protected our cause. DHS did not have to expand its presence in Portland because of peaceful protests. And that's why I'm sitting here this evening. For more than 60 days, the situation in Portland has evolved into nothing more than continuous lengthy riots, life-threatening violence, targeting federal law enforcement and the institutions they diligently defend under the mandate given to them by Congress. These rioters have assaulted federal property, federal officers, local law enforcement personnel, and facilities with hammers, lasers, baseball bats, fireworks, Molotov cocktails, chemicals, and other weapons. Chairman, as you well know, Congress in 40 U.S.C. 1315 directs the Secretary to use DHS law enforcement personnel in order to protect federal property and persons on that property. Federal Protective Service protects over 9,000 facilities every day pursuant to that law. And it's a role that FPS has performed at the Hatfield Courthouse since it opened in 1997 and around the country since the beginning of FPS in 1971. 40 U.S.C. 1315 is further pursuant to Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1, 9, and 18 of the Constitution. Contrary to what some may think, you should be pleased to know that we do not have the option, nor do we ever intend to abandon the mission that Congress serves. Some people who are more interested in telling a story than in truth have made up a number of lies related to federal officers. Here's some facts for the record and for anyone who still cares about truth. All DHS law enforcement personnel in Portland are trained in the conduct of appropriate tactics to conduct our missions while protecting civil liberties and promoting public safety and the safety of our officers. DHS law enforcement officers who interact with crowds are all identifiable by either law enforcement agency and individually. The use of unmarked vehicles by law enforcement is common to avoid potential attacks by criminals on a nightly basis. Violent extremists across the country have intentionally attacked marked police vehicles and attempted to set them on fire, including with officers in them. In closing, Mr. Chairman, let me affirm to the committee and the American people that DHS will not back away from our responsibilities to protect their properties, people using those properties, and our great law enforcement. We remain disappointed in select federal state or demonize law enforcement for kowtow to violent criminals who set fire to our cities, destroy local businesses, target law enforcement officers who harm individuals. I remind this committee that it was a DHS law enforcement officer who was first violence tolerant PSO Patrick was well known for protecting federal and in peaceful protests and political development. PSO underrepresented Americans. White workers also suffer equal but survive. As I sit here, I am unaware of a single one of the politicians who demonize law enforcement around the country to express regret for this act. PSO that difference speaks. DHS knows the difference between peaceful protesting and violence and terrorism. This country cannot survive without a modern police uniform. Those hurling Molotov cocktails at police stations are not just attacking federal police, they're attacking the very foundation of peace and natural rights officers. Thank you both of you for your testimony. Thank you also for your service working to keep America safe. Scott, let me start with you. How many active cases does the Department of Justice or the FBI have, either cases or investigations, violence, rioting, or terrorism that was derived from the riots?
I can speak directly to the FBI. They have, since they over 300 investigations. That does not include any potential civil rights investigations or violent crime associated with the riots, but 300 domestic investigations that have been opened since May 2013.
Mr. Cuccinelli.